one more minute. Everyone popping in here. All right, we'll go ahead and get things started. We are excited to be here today for our afternoon program on Tuesday, Entrepreneurship Ecosystems Day, as part of National Entrepreneurship Week 2022. Before we dive into our conversation, I just want to say a few quick notes. If you have questions throughout all three of these panels, it'll be the same link. Drop them in the Q&A function so they don't get lost in the chat. We'd also love for you to just tell us who you are and where you're from in the chat so that our speakers and our panelists can kind of get a feel for who's in the room. And we are live on Facebook, so we'd love for you to share this, and we'll be sharing it on Twitter and LinkedIn as well across your platforms. Hopefully people can join us that way. And we do have a quick introductory video on what National Entrepreneurship Week is, and then we'll hand it over to our awesome panelists today. So give me one sec.
Entrepreneurship Week. My name is Joe Capp.
And I'm Amber Ravenscroft.
5 years ago, we relaunched National Entrepreneurship Week, a congressionally chartered annual event to support and uplift America's new business startups. Originally founded in 2006, National Entrepreneurship Week takes place every year during the third week of February.
All across the United States, from Maui to Miami to Maine and everywhere in between, America's entrepreneurial ecosystem is vibrant and thriving. National Entrepreneurship Week celebrates the unmatched, innovative American spirit that has brought to life amazing products and services and includes a beautiful tapestry of diverse entrepreneurs.
During the week, you'll hear from a host of United States federal agencies as they share information on their entrepreneurship and small business programs. You'll also hear from a nationwide network of partners, including entrepreneurial educators, ecosystem builders, and most importantly, entrepreneurs from all walks of life as they participate in the excitement of National Entrepreneurship Week.
Join in celebrating National Entrepreneurship Week by organizing an event in your local community, listening in on one of our national webinars, or participating in our annual social media campaign.
There has never been a better time to start a new business, and we challenge you to unleash your ideas into action during National Entrepreneurship Week.
National Entrepreneurship Week is made possible by contributions from an array of generous partners. Views and opinions expressed in National Entrepreneurship Week programs are those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of National Entrepreneurship Week, its agents, or any U.S. government agency. Any agency's participation or support is not an endorsement of any product, service, or entity. All liability with respect to any recommendations are hereby expressly disclaimed. Right. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to our good friend and our longtime partner on National Entrepreneurship Week, Stephen Rodriguez. So Stephen is an awesome ecosystem builder across the nation himself, and we're really excited to have him moderate this first panel talking about building your local entrepreneurship ecosystem. So with that, Stephen, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Amber and Joseph. All right, so welcome to National Entrepreneurship Week 2022. Super excited. This session, we're going to focus on practical steps that entrepreneur serving organizations can take to support efforts at building and engaging in diverse ecosystem. We have an exciting cast, a panel of awesome experts. So my name is Stephen Rodriguez. I'm from 1863 Ventures, where we help build wealth for Black and Brown founders in that sense across the US. But let's introduce the real stars of today's show. If you want to introduce yourselves very quickly.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kiana Daniels. I go by Key. I am a program manager for Parallax Advanced Research, and we are an innovation and research hub in the Midwest, serving academia, government and defense, and local communities who support entrepreneurship.
Oh, Mildred, you might be muted. Oh,
Okay,
we
here we
go.
go. Sorry about that. I had the sun right in my eyes and I couldn't see the microphone little icon at the bottom of the screen. So happy to be here. My name is Mildred Franco. I'm the executive director of the Generator, which is an innovation hub focused on entrepreneurship and digital skills in Pine Bluff, Arkansas.
All right, and good afternoon. My name is Tara St. Clair. I'm the Director of Operations at the Encova Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. I'm also the co-chair for the West Virginia Entrepreneurship Ecosystem. In my center at the Encova Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, we're in West Virginia University and we serve the entire state. So students at the K through 12 level, higher education level, and the community. Thanks for having me here today.
Awesome, awesome. All right, so we're going to get those shows started here. We all came for how do we, as entrepreneurs support organizations, how do we make impact? And there's so much to do, right? So I guess a question for some of the panelists, how did you arrive at what you're doing now? Whatever your core programming and services are that you're providing, was there something that helped you focus in on the specific activity or function? But how did you find your impact or your way of being? Who wants to?
I'll go first. So the Generator is an initiative of Go Forward Pine Bluff, which is a plan developed in 2016 to revitalize the town. And we are part of the economic development pillar. And the work of the Generator was primarily informed by a survey we did in early 2018 to see where the gaps were. And that helped us identify the challenges that were caused by lack of access to capital, limited networks, need for business training, and lack of prioritizing entrepreneurship in the community at large. And since our population is almost 77% Black and over 50% of that are females, we felt that there was a great need to serve that population and also to see entrepreneurship. We see entrepreneurship as a critical pathway for economic empowerment. However, we serve everyone in the city. We don't really discriminate on basis of gender, race. It's just that our population is primarily Black. Obviously, the larger number of people we serve is Black, but we have some Hispanic and we have white people, and we've had veterans, and we have disabled, we have reentry population. So anyone who needs the services that we provide is more than welcome to join.
Awesome. And notice there that they were identifying gaps in the community. So that's interesting to note. They found their value proposition when they began, and then they started to likely expand. Awesome stuff.
I'll add to that. Similar to Mildred, so I work on a project under Parallax Advanced Research called Launch Dayton, and it is a collective project that houses pretty much multiple organizations in our ecosystem here in the Dayton, Ohio region. So we work with a lot of our partners in the ecosystem to serve entrepreneurs at every level, every stage. And so what we're doing is coming together and convening to have collective impact to create a more clear pipeline as to how to navigate our ecosystem. So we're really, we've been building our collective out in phases. So we pretty much rebranded as Launch Dayton back in 2018 before it was Dayton Tech Guide. Even though we were not solely focused on tech-based businesses, the name, having tech in the name made people real or understand that we only serve tech. So we did a rebrand to say Launch Dayton. And what we're doing right now internally with our partners is better understanding what everyone does, who we all serve, and at what level, so that we internally are articulating better to each other so that we can make it easier for our entrepreneurs in the external version. And so we have programs that are cohort-based boot camps that are 10 weeks, 15 weeks between our partners. One that I manage is called Early Risers Academy. And then we also use the Kaufman Foundation Fast Track curriculum. We have one partner, Downtown Dayton Partnership, who has a retail lab more focused on retail type companies. And then we also have a mentor program, and we utilize programs through events by creating resources and by really centralizing the location for entrepreneurial resources as the front door. So Launch Dayton and Dayton is the front door to all of the resources in our ecosystem. So that's kind of what we're working on here in Dayton, and we are phasing it out because we understand that foundation building is highly important in order for us to better serve our entrepreneurs. So that's just kind of a little nugget about what we're doing here in Dayton.
Yeah, and notice there that, entrepreneur support organizations, they kind of go through phases. So, if you're starting out, you're not going to start out big, right? It's okay to start out small, and then you go through phases as you start to grow and accelerate. And I love this focus on collaboration. You can focus on building programs in-house, or you can use third-party programs like Kauffman Fast Track as one example. I loved hearing that stuff.
Absolutely. If I could add one more thing, within the Launch Dayton focus of who our populations are, we pretty much focus on everyone. The Dayton region is very, for lack of better terms, Black and white. And so we want our services to represent the population of Dayton itself. So we want representation from speakers to subject matter experts to people on boards, investors. So we have our DEI strategy that is very much like 50% speakers of BIPOC people, boards and things like that, because we do have a strong focus on BIPOC entrepreneurs. And we want to make sure that when they come to these resources and take advantage of the free resources available, that they see representation, because there is a difference in the entrepreneurial experience from a white entrepreneur to a BIPOC entrepreneur. So that is something that we understand and we build into our programs and our strategy.
Awesome.
And I'm sorry, BIPOC means Black and Indigenous people of color. My apologies.
What about you, Tara?
Yeah, I'll just quickly speak to how the entrepreneurship ecosystem was formed in the state of West Virginia. I was connected to Bill Woodrum, who you guys will be hearing from at the 2 o'clock panel, through the introduction of Joe Cap, who's also speaking in Entrepreneurship Week. So that was in 2019. We all had a shared goal of being like-minded. We wanted to help people across the state of West Virginia. So we wanted to bring together the entrepreneur resource providers from across the state. It was very organic. We've grown into a network of 100 providers across the state of West Virginia now. My center, the Encova Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, is also a piece of that ecosystem. But we're doing things like holding monthly entrepreneurship ecosystem meetings. It's very inclusive. Anyone can join. It's the same day and the same time every month. We have events. So we wanted to make sure that we had a shared calendar. One of the big struggles that we saw was we were competing against each other. So we were trying to all help the same people. And then sometimes our events would be on the same days at the same time. So we wanted to make sure that we created a calendar so we were working collaboratively and not against each other. Another example is working together. We were all going for the same grants. So we thought, why don't we partner together and try and go after these grants and together rather than competing against each other. So, and then this year we are having an entrepreneurship ecosystem conference. We've held it on Zoom in the past, but this will be our first in-person conference. So it's very exciting stuff going on in here in West Virginia.
Nice. And all of them have kind of touched on this notion of collaboration. So as ESOs or entrepreneur support organizations, think about collaboration. You don't need to work in a silo. I think some of the most impressive ecosystems we've been able to see, they tend to collaborate at some point. So, always think about collaboration in some way. But now, when it comes to collaboration, that means building trust to really increase that impact. So we begin to engage across a diversity spectrum of people's populations. For the panelists here, how has your approach with that new majority or those traditionally underrepresented groups, communities of color, however you may want to refer to them, how has that changed from when you first began to the work that you're doing now currently? Are there any lessons learned, especially for new entrepreneur support organizations that are just beginning? Any thoughts or ideas or best practices that come to mind?
So when you're dealing with populations that have been left out of the economic engine of any city, county, or state, the first thing that you would find is that you need to build trust, like you said. right? And especially within the African American community and the Hispanic community, they tend to band together, and because they feel that they're stronger together. And that means that if you're not part of that, naturally part of that community, you need to find a way of becoming part of that community. And that requires a lot of trust. So that's one of the biggest learnings that I found when I started doing this work, is how do I develop trust with them? How do they get to understand that what we're trying to do is for them? Right? Like, we have no hidden agenda. All we want to do is bring the programs and resources and the networks and the connections that they haven't had up to now. Right? And so for us, getting champions or advocates within those communities to speak for us has been really key. Right? So we engage with some of the trusted people in those communities, and then they know of our work, and then they are becoming our advocates and champions in those communities. So most of the people that come to the generator, either for the entrepreneurship program, which is a 13-week cohort program that we do in collaboration with Accenture and Ruralist, they come through referrals, people that have done the cohort first, and then they say, hey, you need to do this if you're really trying to start a business, because you will learn all the basics of creating a business. And same with any of the workshops. We partner with the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, which is nationwide. Every state has one, and they provide knowledge and workshops and one-on-one assistance on how to do business with the government. So, or the ASTBDC, which is the Arkansas Small Business Technology Development Center. So we partner with all of those entrepreneur support organizations that deal with different aspects of the creating the business and getting it going. And again, it's just having that trust that they come in and they feel welcome and they feel included. And you're also being very mindful of including them from the very beginning in the programming, right? I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think? Do you think that has value for your community? Does I think your community will gain something if we had that program? So that has been really key for us. The other piece that has been key is that a lot of our entrepreneurs have full-time jobs. So providing services that allow them to participate in the programming is very important. So inclusion, even from the logistics point of view, right? What time do you have the program? Do you have childcare available if they are having to come in the evenings? Try to do your workshops at noon and provide lunch. Those kinds of things have really made a big difference for the programming that we offer and the people that engage with us.
So for us, a couple things that we've learned in collaborating and trying to have collective impact. First and foremost, it is aligning values and mission with the partners who are at the table. Asking everyone or considering the question, what's in it for me? People, in order to even build trust, we have to, in business and economic development, we have to align it to that mission and value. And sometimes a dollar, what is the incentive? What incentivizes everybody to be at the table, to engage and to contribute to the collective effort? And it can be difficult sometimes, but we found that we are finding still that aligning those things early on is important, and being able to pivot and be agile in that, because it does change. Another thing is something that Mildred touched on is we do mobilize the boots on the ground influencers and champions in the community who are also helping entrepreneurs, not representing an institution. So we have been creative in being able to write them into grants that they otherwise probably wouldn't have access to. So we don't see them as competition. We see them as supporters. We see them as being able to fill gaps that we cannot feel on our own, because we are institutions. One thing that we've learned with working in community and with the local entrepreneurs is that there is a mistrust also to institutions, and to institutions that are primarily white, and so when we are trying to help Black and Indigenous people of color, we have to make sure that, again, we have representation, but Another point that I want to add is that we are intentional about our inclusivity. It has to be intentional. It has to feel genuine. It cannot be to check a box or to get funding or to do any of those things. So when we are bringing partners to the table for us in Dayton, we are asking that question, again, what's in it for you? Are you intentionally trying to be inclusive and diverse? And what is the definition for your organization? So that we can create this shared umbrella of what that means. Another lesson that we've learned is change management and active collaboration takes time. So we have to be patient and diligent in making it happen still. And sometimes we get frustrated at how long it can take, but we still have to have some of those champions who are the ones who are like, we're going to keep working at this because we have to. It is a need and a gap that needs to be filled. And being creative in our methods to actively cooperate and collaborate with each other is something that we've had to play around with as well. And last, another huge lesson that we've learned is being able to acknowledge and accept that not everyone in the ecosystem is going to be a fit for the project or the movement that we're trying to have in being intentionally inclusive. Not every organization really wants to be inclusive. Again, they may be checking a box, and if they are not in alignment with what we are trying to do, we have had to have these conversations, my team and I, with, okay, maybe we just don't include them because it's making it more difficult to do what we are trying to do for the entrepreneurs that we serve. And at the end of the day, we're always constantly asking ourselves and checking ourselves on why are we here in the first place? And that is to serve entrepreneurs better, to make their navigation in the ecosystem and within the resources more easily accessible. And so if we're not always keeping that at the top of mind, then we're not doing something right in the first place. So that's one way that we kind of keep ourselves on track when we are trying to be collective in our approach.
So thanks. I'll just jump in really quickly. You guys have covered so much, and I agree with you. And just to reiterate, the trust and inclusion and representation, I can speak to my institution personally, which is West Virginia University, that there's been a huge push to be more inclusive. We have an incredible diversity, equity, and inclusion office. And now in my college, which is the John Chambers College of Business and Economics, we have a full-time staff member, as well as a committee that I sit on. So I'm personally always trying to learn and grow, and I'm very appreciative of the resources that are provided to me for free. I'm lucky that I can do all of those things on my time. So like you guys were mentioning, holding things at lunchtime and providing lunch, or having things in the evenings so it's accessible to everyone. One of the lessons that I've learned is representation matters, and we're always trying to make everyone feel welcome and comfortable in our center, and really being open to change. And like you guys mentioned, I'm sorry, I'm reiterating a lot of things that have already been said, but it's important that we need to be intentional. And I'm lucky to live in a place that there's a half a degree of separation. So if someone needs something very specific, I typically can call someone or text someone, because our network is very tight knit. We're very lucky to live in a place that it's close, and I don't have to make blind phone calls. We usually typically, if someone needs something very specific, we know someone in our entrepreneurship ecosystem where it exists and they can get that very specific help.
Awesome. And a central theme here is just keeping a pulse on the entrepreneur, the people you're looking to serve, whether it's by seeking mutual alignment when working with partners and making sure that the missions are aligning, or being agile and pivoting if and where realistic, or engaging with influencers or other stakeholders to help spread the word to the specific communities that you may not be touching, or there's gaps that you want to fill to be synergistic with the other multitude of partners that are in the ecosystem. So just some of the few things that kind of stuck out from these amazing panelists. We're focused on creating impact, right? Because that's what we're charged to do. But a need arises also to kind of communicate that impact. I know we're here to do the good work, but how do we share this, and why is that important? So for the panelists, what are some ways in which you have kind of refined the art of amplifying your entrepreneurial ecosystem message, so to speak? Has there been a reason for you to do that? And if so, how have you been refining it over time? Any thoughts or ideas there?
So as a nonprofit, you're always accountable to your funders, right? And so they're the first ones that you kind of have to be mindful of how you report the impact, because that's what they want to do. They want to do, if they're giving you X amount of money, what is the impact that you're creating? But for me, not that I don't do that, I do that with quarterly reports, annual reports, depending on the grant and the funder. But for me, more importantly, is getting the message out to the community, because up until now, there hasn't been an organization like ours. So for a lot of people, they don't even know that there is this service. So the way that we have reached out to the community is by asking the people that we have served, and they feel that we have served them well, to do testimonials, whether it's video testimonials or social media testimonials, or, you know, if there is a big article in the press, to speak to the reporter who's doing the article, or the radio, you know, if we're going on radio, to call in and talk about their experience. That has been more effective as far as getting our message out than me going to civic groups, which I did at the beginning. I spoke at every civic group. I spoke to the schools. I spoke to other people. And I think letting others speak for ourselves as far as the impact that we're having in their lives, in their businesses, and how the work that we're doing has changed the way that they do things, or have, especially during COVID. You know, we tried to bring in the capital that people needed to survive, and having them speak about that. I speak about, if it hadn't been for that grant that Ms. Franco brought, I would not be here today, or I would not have been able to pay my employees, or I was able to bring back my employees, whatever the case may be, right? So that has been a lot more effective than me trying to get out there and talk to people. I just find that, you know, if I get 2 or 3 people out of each cohort that I run, or one person out of every so many workshops to go out there and talk about it, that brings in a whole, you know, 10 times more people than me talking about it.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of what Mildred said. And I think one of the things that we've done to kind of sum it up is, so we share stories, entrepreneurial stories. So in our launch date and newsletter, which goes out every Tuesday to about over 2,500 people in our ecosystem, we share all the stories, from good news to openings, to milestones that were hit, to growth opportunities. So if someone's doing a Kickstarter or whatever it is, we share those things. We share stories by contracting our entrepreneurs into opportunities when we receive grants that need people to support, instead of going to some, you know, already well-known organization or professional service provider. We like to not only educate and equip our entrepreneurs, but give them the opportunities to actually do business and make money and grow. We have various platforms where we invite them to be a part as subject matter experts, again, to give them the exposure. A lot of our programming and events and conferences and things like that is definitely spread through word of mouth. So to Mildred's point, testimonials. So we find funding opportunities to be able to tell the stories from the entrepreneur's perspective, like wholeheartedly, the good, the bad, the challenging, all of it, because people resonate with real and authenticity. Another thing that we do, we create platforms to showcase the businesses through pitches and things like that. And so we've done a great job in the last, I would say, about 4 years of really doing a better job of telling the stories of our entrepreneurs, but also the organizations that are helping those entrepreneurs in our ecosystem. My colleague, Audrey, she's our director of communications and social media. And so she does a phenomenal job. And we have had so many people reach out to us because they've seen those stories. They've heard about a program because of something that she put out there. And so it's been really very helpful in just helping us to better tell our story. And from an internal perspective, we do a great job of telling all the entrepreneur stories. We're working on transferring that for the internal story as well, about how we have worked well together as a collective. We haven't really told that story that well, but we're working on it right now. And so it's helping us to get more traction. And also, I'll say this, like, being able to be on panels like this that are, you know, for national conferences and things like that. I'm only here today because I spoke at a conference last October and, you know, Bill saw me. And so here I am today. So being able to take advantage of opportunities like this to tell, hey, this is what's going on in little old Dayton, Ohio. Because when people talk about Ohio, they don't talk about Dayton. They talk about Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, but these are opportunities for us to say, no, but we're doing some really great things here. We're having some really amazing impact. And, you know, people have been learning more about Dayton's entrepreneurial ecosystem that, you know, when you look on the map, you don't think about Dayton. So these are some of the opportunities that we take advantage of.
Yeah, and just to keep going on the momentum that we have, I can speak to what has worked for us at the West Virginia Entrepreneurship Ecosystem. Really the consistency, I will say, for our monthly meetings. They are the same time, the same day each month. They're recorded and added to the website. We always have a spotlight entrepreneur resource provider that for each month. And then we open it up to announcements. So someone might say, hey, I've got an entrepreneur down here in Southern West Virginia and they really need X, Y, and Z help. Can anyone help them? And then everyone can jump in and say, yeah, absolutely. I know a guy up north. So it's really great to see that collaboration from folks that might not necessarily know each other, but because they were on the meeting, they're able to connect with the entrepreneur. In addition to those monthly meetings, we have an email that goes out each month and a blog that goes on the West Virginia Business Link website. And this year, I mentioned earlier, we're having the Entrepreneurship Ecosystem Conference in April. That is a part of a greater event that we're having called Bridging Innovation. So we've got 10 events that week going on. We've got the Entrepreneurship Ecosystem Conference, and we have a couple of other conferences, but we have 10 events, all different types of pitching events. We've got students from across the state coming in. We're very lucky that the Department of Education is on board and supporting all of this stuff. So we're going to have not only the entrepreneurs there and the entrepreneur resource providers, but we have future entrepreneurs and government officials. So we just try to expose as many people as we can to what we're doing. And it will be recorded and live streamed for those who cannot attend live.
Awesome. Some highlights here that I'm hearing is really beyond just the funder responsibility, communicate to really help share the opportunity, share those stories, or build a platform to raise awareness of the amazing founders in your local area, whether that's through spotlights, pitch competitions, or building pathways or nodes between the community members themselves to help each other. So all of this is amplifying that impact. So something as simple as just communication of what's happening, of what you're doing, can help amplify impact even more, beyond just traditional, hey, let me report back to my funders. Awesome. And now here, we've learned a lot already from all these great panelists, but for each one, we definitely want, if you can share with us 3 learning lessons or best practices that can help other organizations be more effective at building and engaging in diverse ecosystems. Does anything come to mind? Do you want to highlight something you already shared because it's very critical and key, or is there something that you want to focus on that you haven't shared already?
So I'll go, not to break the flow, I'll go first again. And so for me, it's so many learning lessons in the past 4 years. But the ones that I would like to highlight are the following. Develop or grow services and programs that meet entrepreneurs where they are. Be a good listener. Every community, especially in rural, and I know this is a National Entrepreneurship Week and we're not focused in rural, but I'm focused on rural. So especially in rural, every community is different. Every culture of every community is different. So be a good listener, see where your entrepreneurs are, and meet them where they are with your programs and services. Bring them along to do better, to grow, but meet them where they are at first. Otherwise, you won't be able to develop that trust, okay? The other thing is be inclusive in all you do, not only in the representation of the subject matter experts or the people who do the programs or the people you invite to the programs, but in everything, including the logistics, like I said before, so that you can ensure that no one is left out. And then the last main thing I would say is always be uplifting, amplifying, and connecting your entrepreneurs and be an advocate for them. So get involved in policy issues. I know that there's a lot of work that we need to do, but I find that if we're not involved in policy issues, then we can really change the conversation. You know, policy is important. You know, programming is important, being there for your entrepreneurs is important, but also being at the table when you're creating policy is important. So make sure that you are connected to your state representative, to your congressman, to your senators, and see what is the conversation around entrepreneurship that they're involved in. Are they not involved? Why are they not involved? Your mayor, your city council, educate them. That way you can be an advocate for your entrepreneurs, not only at the service and program level, but also at the policy level.
I love that, Mildred. Thank you for sharing that. And I'll add some lessons that we've learned is, you know, don't assume, invite the entrepreneurs in. I think a lot of times entrepreneurial support organizations or ecosystem builders, we like to assume what we think the entrepreneur needs, and sometimes we miss the mark, and then we're constantly doing the work over and over and over again because we haven't invited them in to tell us what they want. So that's something that we're learning. Also, in working with your partners and trying to collaborate, be clear and focused. A lot of times the problem in the meetings on top of meetings on top of meetings, having the same conversations, is because we're not being clear enough and we're not focusing on like what we're actually trying to do. We're not working smart, but hard. And so I'm a person that likes to work smart and get to the root cause. So, and that leads me into my second, or my another point is to play to your strengths. If you have people who are at the table, it needs to be a transdisciplinary kind of approach where you have multiple perspectives at the table where we can all play to our strengths. Not everybody has to do the same thing or fight for some, you know, we want to be the ones who are known to do this. Like, you know, play to your strengths. What do you do really well? The same things that we talk to our entrepreneurs about is the same thing that we should hold our partners and ecosystem builders to is, you know, what do we do really well? And to be innovative. We work in the innovative space, and a lot of times we get stuck on tradition and we're not being innovative in our approach to better serve entrepreneurs. And this is something that we've been talking about in our ecosystem. Is like, how do we continue to remind ourselves to be innovative and creative in our approaches? You know, let's try something different, you know, that we've never tried before. Let's think outside of the box. How do we better serve our entrepreneurs? Nothing's off the table and anything is possible if we can really focus and get creative with it. And then again, I'll just lastly is, you know, again, being intentional and authentic in our approach and in our efforts to help entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs can totally feel when it's not intentional or when it's not authentic. And so that does not help us in our goal if they feel like they can't trust us. One last thing, be holistic. So we have been doing more work around, okay, getting to the root cause. Sometimes we're trying to solve here, but we don't understand what the root cause is. And until we get to that root cause, and maybe, again, going back to playing to strengths, we may not have the knowledge base for that, but how do we bring in other partners that may not typically fall into the entrepreneurial ecosystem? But for instance, when we're trying to help Black and Indigenous people of color entrepreneurs, the journey's not the same. There are some foundational things that we have to address first. So working with maybe some social workers to address some of those environmental factors, or financial literacy, working with banks or financial institutions to get to how do we help them be successful in business? Well, we can't help them be successful in business until we get to some of these other foundational things, and then we can be more successful here. So that's something that we're learning right now. And it's more clear than ever. And so we're getting a really out of our box and being a lot more innovative. And it's really very exciting right now.
All right. And of course, there was a lot of synergy here. And I agree with what all of my panelists said. So some of my stuff that I have written down are very similar to what you guys have said. But again, collaboration is key, and checking inside and outside of your direct or traditional networks. I know that Kiana just mentioned that. The second one for me was creating a safe and welcoming environment for everyone to share their ideas, which I know has been a common theme throughout today's discussion. And finally, just keep pushing. There's always going to be roadblocks. If you're feeling like you're burning out, ask for help. And as Kiana just said, work smarter, not harder. And I guess that takes us back to collaboration, that there are great people out here and we all work better together.
Awesome. And some things that kind of stuck out from each of the panelists, listen to your entrepreneurs and be inclusive across the spectrum, whether that's topics, industries, logistics. So just keep that in mind. There's a breadth of spectrum here when it comes to diversity and how you engage the entrepreneurs, and also policy. Think about that as you're working to do impact with one-to-one with the entrepreneur. Others here, be holistic until you understand that root problem as best you can, and be intentional and authentic. And of course, go beyond your traditional networks and create that safe environment. And you won't know everything, and that's all right. So it's okay to ask for help or ask others when you're not sure about something. So awesome. Here we have some questions from the audience. So we're going to jump into those. The first two, they kind of focus a little bit around the collaboration piece, working with other ecosystem partners. For the panelists here, could you talk a little bit if your local libraries are involved in the system? Any thoughts here from the panelists?
I'll speak to that. We actually utilize our library very, very much. We tell entrepreneurs all the time, especially when you are limited in your resources and your money, the library is still free, and it has an abundance of free resources. And your business librarian, whether there's one dedicated or not, we used to have one dedicated. She's no longer there, but the resources itself still are. And we make sure that our entrepreneurs know about the library as a resource. One thing that we really always let entrepreneurs know about the library's resources is the databases, the research databases that they have. And if you have a library card, that's all you need to log into that. So they have like business reference databases. They have, it used to be Reference USA. I think it's under a different name. And then they have like a business A to Z or something like that. So we definitely make sure that our entrepreneurs and all of our programs are very much connected to the library and the resources that they have available.
Yeah, I'll add to that we have a partnership with our library primarily around digital skills, which is something all of our entrepreneurs here are a little bit lacking. So we run a digital navigator program in partnership with Rural List and the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. And we partner with the library because they have a great deal of resources, like Kiana said, about digital training and business training in general. So we always sending our entrepreneurs, like if you want to learn about something specific to help your business, all you need is a library card, and then here is a menu of resources that they have. So I think our library just built a beautiful library that just opened like a year and a half ago. And so they have a new director, and he's very collaborative, and we have a great relationship. So I think that helps too. The previous director of the library wasn't really that inclusive. So we are pushing through, Tara, through those little bumps on the road and making people come together. And I'm really looking forward to, now that we're kind of putting the pandemic a little bit behind us, what we really can do with the library together, because we're only like one block away from the library. So there's great synergy as far as where we are physically located and also the collaboration we're trying to establish now.
Very great. And, over in the DC area, I know the DC Public Library is one example in Washington, DC, where we tend to work with them a lot. Usually they get great perks, and even some of them are more skills building. For example, they offered lynda.com membership for all the residents. So it's just a great perk to let people know about, especially if as an entrepreneur, you don't know about marketing or you don't know about sales, but you can access these resources through the library. And they're free for you as a resident. So
actually lynda.com got bought out by LinkedIn. So now it's like what used to be LinkedIn training is now all accessible, at least through my library, and I'm hearing it's also accessible in DC. So I'm assuming it's a whole library thing all over the place. but those are great resources. Absolutely. I have a Vista right now who's working on a digital menu of all the different categories that are available through LinkedIn Learning at the library, so that we can better navigate the system and help them, because it can be overwhelming. You know, you go to the library, you open LinkedIn, they're like 6,000 courses, right? So where do I start? So I'm having a Vista working through that right now to see if we can create a menu of resources for them through all that training, so that it is easier for entrepreneurs to navigate what they offer.
Awesome.
I'll just speak to one thing about that as well. So Bill Woodrum, who's speaking on the next panel, he runs our West Virginia Business Link, and we have, like you guys, so many resources available. So the libraries are one of those resources, but we push everyone to go to this website. So everyone is welcome to put their resources in there, so you can kind of go through and figure out what is available, not only in your area, your county, your state, and nationally. So we've been working on organizing all of our resources as well, because it can sometimes feel overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And on the next panel also is John Traska from Every Library. So make sure you also attend that panel if you're interested in libraries and how to engage with them a bit more. One last question around collaboration here. You know, there's moments in time where we hit a wall, whether it's a bad actor, somebody just doesn't know what you do, they don't understand. How do you engage bad actors? What do you recommend? How do you go about engaging them?
I'll chime in here. On the bad actors, I think it can get very frustrating. And I think that's a point that I had made earlier, is that, you know, being able to acknowledge and be real with yourself about, you know, not everybody fits the mold. Not everybody wants to do what you're trying to accomplish, and that is okay. I think being able to say, hey, trying to engage them and be collective, putting that invitation out there, but just accepting that it's okay that not everybody wants to do exactly what you're doing, and to align with the people who do, so that the work is easier and it's more collaborative. And so there is just a level of being real with yourself, and not expecting a partner to want to do what you want to do, just because you work very closely with them. That is something that we have dealt with in our ecosystem. Is, you know, well, we work with these partners all the time, you know, why it makes sense for them to want to get on board with this, but yet and they may verbally say that, but then their functions look very differently. And so at some point you just have to get real and say, okay, I mean, you know, we're either going to work together and we're going to align, or we're not, and it's okay, but we're going to focus our efforts and our energy over here, because we truly want to have impact with our community and the entrepreneurs that we're serving.
Yeah, I'll agree with Kiana on that. You know, you can invest so much energy and time in trying to force, I don't know if that's the right word, or bring people along where they really have no intention to come along. Right. So at some point you have to realize, like, okay, they're talking, but they're not acting on it. So let's just not, you know, it's not like you don't want to engage with them, but at some point you have to realize who's really aligned with your work and who is not. And always leave the door open in case they change their minds, because people do change their minds, you know, but know where you spend your time and your energy, because like you said, Stephen, at the beginning, there is so much work to get done. And a lot of us are not necessarily staff rich. We are staff starved. So being mindful of where you put your energy and your time is very important.
Yeah, I could not agree more, Mildred. I will say I'm a volunteer on the Entrepreneurship Ecosystem. So I'll just say I always try and have a private conversation to find out what the real problem is. Sometimes it's out of a place of scarcity, typically over funds. People are worried that you're gonna start collaborating and they're not included, and all of a sudden they've lost their grant that is keeping them alive. And it's really just having the conversation and clarifying that we're not here to compete. We want to work together. Let's figure out how we can all work together, and who's here for the right reasons. And that's what I think it comes down to, is who's doing this for the right reasons.
Awesome. So we've heard some great ideas, great feedback, great nuggets of wisdom from these amazing panelists. I know we're about to come at time, but I've shared with you all here the LinkedIn in case you want to connect with any of them. I know Mildred, at some point, somebody asked if you could share a little more about that curated learning and with the digital library, that digital training. So if you want to connect or want to follow up with the speakers, feel free to connect with them, whether on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and I'm sure we're all open to kind of collaborate as best we can, especially as you're looking to grow and accelerate your own entrepreneur support organization in your local city. But thank you again to the amazing panelists. I don't know if there's any last one parting advice that you want to share with the community. Anything come to mind?
The work is hard, but it's very rewarding. So don't do it because it's hard. Just do it. You'll find that the rewards are 10 times what the work is. And it's just so amazing to see your community come together with a common purpose of making your community better and using entrepreneurship as an empowerment tool. It's worth it.
And I'll add, stay true to the entrepreneurs. Again, we're all here as ecosystem builders, entrepreneur support organizations to better serve our entrepreneurs, to equip them, prepare them, position them to be able to start right and grow and scale. So sometimes we lose sight of who we're working for. And I think we just need to constantly check ourselves and remind ourselves who we're here for. The second thing is, one of the things that we've done with our partnership, our launch date and partnership, is we've formalized that agreement, what that looks like. So when we reach out to partners or partners reach out to us for collaborative efforts, we have formalized an agreement to, like, what is your contribution? What is the expected contribution? That means we're the managers of this, but we want you to actively participate. And so that has helped us. We're still figuring it out, but we understand what partners are really here for it and which ones are not. And so it gives us the clarity that we need to move forward in the work.
Yeah, and just to echo Mildred and Kiana, it's worth it. And to stay true to the entrepreneurs and just keep swimming, keep telling your story, get it out there. And more people will grow. If you have the right mission, people are going to come to that and work together. So keep up the good fight.
And thank you.
And on my end, I'll definitely share, it's a learning experience. We go through phases. Don't worry. You're not here to know it all right now. You'll learn it all as you go. So just keep on trucking. It'll all come to you over time. But thank you again
thank you for moderating this panel. And Tara and Kiana, it was lovely being on the panel with you. Thank you for all your insights and wisdom that you shared today.
Yes, thank you all as well, and for the opportunity.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. I've taken nuggets from both Tara and Mildred, Stephen, and everyone else from the questions. We're going to apply some things here in the Dayton region.
Yeah.
Well, next time, let's do it in person.
Yeah, right.
As somebody who's also done this work, I want to just give a shout out to everybody who's here and attending and listening, and to all those people who are out there. This is hard work. I mean, it is really, really hard work. And if you're doing it right, it's really hard work. I've seen a lot of different aspects. And so I just want to go ahead, in addition to thanking all of our panelists, I just want to give a warm thank you to everybody who goes out every day and does this work and wages a proverbial fight in order to go ahead and increase economic equality for communities all across the United States. It is a difficult job. It is a thankless job. And so thank you. Because we know, Amber and I have been now working with National Entrepreneurship Week the last 6 years. And we know just getting that off the ground and the forces of inertia that can sometimes take place, not just nationally, but regionally and locally. So thank you to all of you who are listening today. We have an exciting panel that's going to be coming up next. And Amber, I'm going to throw it over to you to share with what's coming up next.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, we're going to have about a 5-minute transition period here where we get our next panel lined up. I just want to, again, thank this incredible lineup of people. It was an awesome conversation. And the comments in the chat really speak to how engaging it was. So the next conversation actually lends itself really well to things that we pointed on, as was mentioned in this about libraries. We have a panel on leveraging national resources for your entrepreneurship ecosystem. So go ahead, grab a glass of water. We'll get all panelists all set up, and then we will be right back at 2 o'clock for the start of the hour. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, Bill, we have a couple of attendees on, but I'm going to go ahead and get everyone pinned because they're probably going to roll over. John Kraska, how are you? Good to see
Amber,
you.
it's such a pleasure. My goodness, it's been forever.
Been
We live
too
just down
long.
the street from each other too, all intents and purposes.
I know. We need to have lunch or something.
COVID. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Never mind. Yeah, we'll have some lunch now.
I'll stay outside. I'll come visit you outside your window.
Oh no. Right now I'm cool. I'm vaxxed. I'm ready to roll.
You were a hot topic of the last conversation. I don't know how long you were, when you joined us, but there was a lot of conversations about local libraries and how they participate in the ecosystem. So
I came in at the tail end of that. I think it's pretty exciting. I got some connections to make on LinkedIn for sure.
yeah, for sure.
Okay, good. Nathan, you're sideways currently. I don't know if you know.
Spider-Man.
David, good to see you. Susan, how are you all?
Hey, Amber.
You have the whitest teeth I have ever seen in Zoom.
Sorry,
Your teeth are so bright. Like they look very white.
I
Yeah.
gotta pay my dentist for the great job he did. Honestly, actually, I gotta pay my parents. You've got a dark skin, the teeth get wider automatically. So
They look gorgeous.
thank you.
All these chats are probably, these attendees watching us this transition are probably like, but I have to come.
Nathan, congratulations. First time I'm seeing you on a call, Nathan. So congratulations on your new role.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
When do you make the transition?
I did. I'm a weekend. I'm 7 days in. So
Oh, fantastic. Forgive me, I lost track of time. So good for you.
thank you.
Yeah. And David and Susan, nice to meet you both here in this context. Thanks for being part of it.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you all. I've linked in with John, with you, and with Susan as well. So
Excellent. Bill, thanks for carrying the load too. It's nice of you.
You guys make it easy. This is the easiest panel ever. It's like, say something brilliant and you all are right there. So that's
Well, I mean, I
amazing.
feel like I got my my question into you before the start of the business day. So it still counts as yesterday in some contexts. So.
We'll give it about 3 minutes so you guys have some time. Bill, anything on your final end for coordination, or like you said, you got an awesome lineup here. So
Yeah, they all showed up, so I think we're good to go.
okay, perfect. We'll do a
Bill,
quick.
I'm sorry, Bill, are you gonna take the questions in order that
Probably go with the flow. I'm kind of
Okay.
an organic guy. As I see, if somebody's question leads into another, we'll kind of flow around a little bit.
just
Yeah,
looking
and I heard Jen, good point, Jen. If you wouldn't mind, while you're here, put your contact for Twitter and put your account for Twitter in the chat. We'll go ahead and tag you as Jen's tweeting throughout.
nice.
Powerful insights. So that means we're going to tweet every single minute of this panel because y'all are going to have good things to say. So
Ethan, I have yours, and Bill, I have yours earlier.
Thanks. Does my background on my phone, it looks like it's mirrored, but does it come across the way it's supposed to everyone else?
Yeah, just remember there are folks still on here. Just as remember, it's an open mic, so don't go ahead and say anything. Your background looks great. It looks great. Just wanted to remind everybody.
thanks,
Sometimes.
Joe. Yeah, there's no need to go back into practice session with these. So hi, everyone who's listening in. Yeah, you get to know our personalities. It's a good little fun time.
All
Give it a quick-
ecosystem building.
Yeah.
Jen was commenting on how much collaboration was in the chat, and I was like, that's just ecosystem builders. That's a normal chat.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, and I think all of us all of us who participate in National Entrepreneurship Week and have led organizations and done this work have experienced the trials and the tribulations, and frankly, that's part of the reason, to get everybody together, to have a common bond, in terms of working together. We've all had those naysayers and those doomsdayers, and the people who we had a saying over when we were working at a community college is let the lone wolves hunt. And it's probably a good saying to let them do their own thing and focus on your mission. Mildred said that, in the last session, and it's absolutely true. Don't get distracted. It's easy to get distracted from the important work and your passion and your mission. And it's important to stay focused. So
I think the most amazing thing about today is that we're with people who actually understand what we do, which my wife is a fourth grade teacher. So everybody knows what she does when she says she's a fourth grade teacher. When she says my husband manages ecosystems, they're like, what?
Yeah, they probably think you're working in some sort of field or something like that, right? Like some sort of biologist.
Yeah.
He's an ecosystem manager.
I love it. Well, we're going to go ahead and get kicked off. It's the top of the hour. So I am going to just quickly introduce National Entrepreneurship Week. So hi, everyone. I am Amber Ravenscroft, a co-chair of National Entrepreneurship Week, along with Joe Cack, who lent his insights there just as we were beginning the panel. So we have a quick introductory video, and then I'm going to throw it over to Bill Woodrum with the West Virginia Entrepreneurship Ecosystem, and we will get started.
Welcome to National Entrepreneurship Week. My name is Joe Catt.
And I'm Amber Ravenscroft.
5 years ago, we relaunched National Entrepreneurship Week, a congressionally chartered annual event to support and uplift America's new business startups. Originally founded in 2006, National Entrepreneurship Week takes place every year during the third week of February.
All across the United States, from Maui to Miami to Maine and everywhere in between, America's entrepreneurial ecosystem is vibrant and thriving. National Entrepreneurship Week celebrates the unmatched, innovative American spirit that has brought to life amazing products and services and includes a beautiful tapestry of diverse entrepreneurs.
During the week, you'll hear from a host of United States federal agencies as they share information on their entrepreneurship and small business programs. You'll also hear from a nationwide network of partners, including entrepreneurial educators, ecosystem builders, and most importantly, entrepreneurs from all walks of life as they participate in the excitement of National Entrepreneurship Week.
Join in celebrating National Entrepreneurship Week by organizing an event in your local community, listening in on one of our national webinars, or participating in our annual social media campaign.
There has never been a better time to start a new business, and we challenge you to unleash your ideas into action during National Entrepreneurship Week.
National Entrepreneurship Week is made possible by contributions from an array of generous partners. Views and opinions expressed in National Entrepreneurship Week programs are those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of National Entrepreneurship Week, its agents, or any U.S. government agency. Any agency's participation or support is not an endorsement of any product, service, or entity. All liability with respect to any recommendations are hereby expressly disclaimed. Perfect. So I think, the panelists will speak for themselves. We have a powerful panel here on leveraging national resources. So I don't want to take too long on an introduction, but if you've been with us from the first panel, you'll see a lot of common threads rolling over into this one. If you're new, welcome. Please use the chat to introduce yourself and Q&A for any questions. And please remember, this is an educational program, so no selling or advertising for your businesses in the chat. We really want to make this collaborative and sharing of resources. So with that, Bill, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Amber. I really appreciate the opportunity to come today. And as Amber said, it just really humbled to be with such a powerful panel. Just to kind of frame us a little bit here as we start, we're in the middle of a small business boom in this country. Axios just reported that there were 5.4 million applications to start new businesses in 2021. That's up 53% from 2019. Obviously, what is also going to happen is support for these entrepreneurs is going to have to rise. With this session, we're going to engage some leaders from around the nation who have leveraged the strength of their regional and national organizations to really help build stronger support systems, stronger entrepreneurial ecosystems for our small business owners and business owners throughout the country. So I'm going to turn it over to each of the panelists to introduce themselves, and they all get one question to start with. And as you introduce yourself, your title, your organization, I also want to know what excites you most about what you're doing and working with and supporting entrepreneurship from your position at a large organization. We'll start off with David.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, based on where you're listening from. I am so excited to be on this panel today, so thank you for having me. And I am just as eager as the rest of you to hear and learn from the other panelists. I think I am lucky to go first because I get to say what I'm excited most, and I think everybody else is going to say the same thing. So maybe I'll get first shot at it. Before I introduce what we do, my name is David Ponraj. I'm based out of Tampa, Florida. And what excites me most about entrepreneurship today is the amount of excitement there is in entrepreneurship. And I'll say a really short story because we've got Nathan on the call. In Indianapolis 4 years ago, we were talking to some IEDC folks at the conference. And I said, we're an ecosystem building. And somebody did like a double take and said, what was that again? And today, IEDC offers a course on entrepreneurship-led economic development, right? So I don't think there is a better time to be an entrepreneur than today. There is so much focus both at the federal level, but even at the local level. Economic developers now realize that entrepreneurship can be a true path to wealth creation, just as much as workforce development, business attraction and retention. And it's no longer that red-haired stepchild. Right now, it really has its own place in what economic development can look like. So really excited for the time we live in. And I think it's going to get even better. And we've heard all kinds of sayings that pandemics can actually help spur more innovation. And I'm looking forward to that in this coming decade. The reason why we exist is a few years back, I was trying to solve a critical problem about starting a business. In 2008, I had a business that was a handbag business that crashed and burned in spite of my best efforts. And I told myself, starting a business in America can't be so hard. I'm from India, moved to the US as an immigrant, and I had come to the promised land. And it can't be so hard to start a business in the US. But unfortunately, my business didn't succeed. So in 2018, I started on this journey to say, we've got to make business starts easier. And one way in which we can do it is to better connect the resources that are available to entrepreneurs. And so I went on this journey talking to ecosystem builders across the country. And the common thread across the board was that, well, our communities are siloed too, that we also want to kind of create this network of entrepreneurship support organizations that can help small businesses start, so that no matter who you talk to, there is no wrong door in the community, that every door is a front door, whether you're talking to the library system, or you're talking to an SBDC or a SCORE or a women's business center or an incubator, or even just the mentor down the road, that there is a common way to describe the resources available to small businesses. And so today, Economic Impact Catalyst exists primarily as a way to help small business starts in over 100 different communities across the US. And just like it made starting the second business easier for me, our mission is to make that easier for all the other businesses that get started around the US today. And again, thank you for having me on this panel.
Thank you so much, David. And that's the exact phrase we use here at West Virginia Business Link is there's no wrong door. An entrepreneur should never find a wrong door as they're trying to come in. Next, we'll go to John and let you introduce yourself. And as a reminder, what excites you most about the work you're doing and working with entrepreneurship from your perspective?
Bill, thanks a lot. Everybody, hi, I'm John Kraska. I'm the executive director for an organization called Every Library. We're a national political action committee for libraries, and also the Every Library Institute, which is a national public policy, tax policy think tank for libraries. Bill, what's really exciting to me right now about entrepreneurship is the opportunity to move the library community from Andrew Carnegie's approach to say, the people's university was the library. Back in the old days, everyone had a chance because the public library was available. I want to see this part of the 21st century be the people's accelerator, the people's incubator. I'm most excited about the kind of opportunities that are coming out of ARPA funding in particular for the community anchor institutions and from the infrastructure bill and the Digital Equity Act. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity for the library to really fulfill its hope for incubating and accelerating anyone's idea for prosperity and to create more thriving, prosperous communities in the process by putting those kinds of sincere infrastructure supports to work properly. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing what the rest of the panel has to think about this too. We're all nodes, we're all in different branches of that ecosystem together.
Definitely are. And I was excited to see Lisa Hashesky from the West Virginia Library Commission is on here. It was a personal invitation. I'm glad she was on here to hear some of your work, John. She's a great partner for us here in West Virginia. So next we'll ping down to the new president and CEO, Nathan Oley. I'll let you introduce yourself, Nathan. Again, what's the most exciting thing going on in entrepreneurship right now from your perspective?
Well, thanks for having me, Bill, and for hosting this conversation. I'm excited to be with you. Nathan Oley, I'm the president and CEO of the International Economic Development Council, which is the world's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan membership association for economic developers. And we serve the entire spectrum of economic development field, and obviously including the entrepreneurship side. And David mentioned the Entrepreneurship Development Professional Program that we developed over the last year. That's a really exciting time to be a part of that transformation, and certainly to have all of these partners on the call alongside us in that journey. For me, I think the most exciting part about where we are right now is the actual kind of realization from a broad spectrum of folks about how important entrepreneurship-led economic development truly is. And we've got folks that are engaging in these conversations that have never been a part of it in the past. And we've got folks that have been doing this for decades that are now helping to bring others alongside them in this journey. So I'm just excited to be a part of that journey, to be one piece of this puzzle. There's a lot of great things happening and certainly a lot of opportunity moving.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you for coming in today. Really excited to have you here. And finally, last but of course not least, Susan Edwards from the Delta Regional Authority. I believe Susan's in Little Rock, Arkansas, which is like a second hometown to me since I have in-laws out there. So really looking forward to hearing from Susan. Susan, tell us a little bit about yourself and really what excites you most from your regional perspective at the Delta Regional Authority.
Again, thank you for having me. Delta Regional Authority is headquartered in Clarksdale, Mississippi, and we work remotely. So I'm in Little Rock, love it here. What really excites me about small business is this chance to see these companies expand, be strategic in their capacity building, making their dreams come true. I'm actually married to a small business owner, so I've seen, the late nights of trying to make decisions. And our programming is going to bring technical assistance to these entrepreneurs and small business. So we're going to meet them where their troubles are. We're going to help them seek their resources. We're going to help them identify pain points and to overcome them and move to the next level.
Thank you, Susan. It's exciting for you to be seeing both sides of that, both as an owner and as a support organization in an ecosystem. So we're going to get into our kind of moderated dialogue at this point. We'll have a few questions. Again, if any of our participants have questions they want to drop in the Q&A, please do that so we can see them and get those answered for you. We're going to go ahead and start right now with one we'll throw out there. And David, I may put you on the spot with this one just because of what you said in your introduction. And so what do you see as those barriers to innovating and adapting products or service offerings to really capitalize on the business opportunities? You said you saw those and ran into some barriers. And I think then specifically, what kinds of ecosystem support help reduce these barriers and can really bring entrepreneurs forward more quickly?
Okay, I will talk a little bit about the opportunity. The solution, I think we will all co-create. But I think the biggest opportunity we see today is access to capital. I think that by far over 50% of all businesses we work with talk about how incredibly hard it is to get capital. And I'm not talking about the hockey stick VC funded capital that we see on Twitter. I'm talking about everyday Main Street businesses and the challenges to capital. I think the system around how we determine who is capital worthy is broken. I think that, we look at traditional scores, traditional things like credit scores, or having access to a good banking partner, or, who has the ability to get a friends and family round, or has some kind of a capital asset, or, collateral they can provide. And I think all of those things disadvantage small and micro businesses. If the end goal for us is wealth creation, and if entrepreneurship is a means to an end of wealth creation, like housing, affordable housing, and childcare, and all the other pieces, I think we should change the lens from how we look at capital access. And we can't say that repayability is the primary driving force on how we allocate capital. Like, there are, of course, grant programs and other programs available, but the majority of small businesses don't qualify for these things. And so I think that we are at a time where if we truly want to double down on entrepreneurship, capital access is by far the biggest barrier that is standing in front of us. And I think that, small businesses work really hard, and being a small business, you are going to miss a payroll here and there. You're going to have cash flow problems and things like that. And these can actually be detrimental to the long-term success of a small business if there isn't easy access to capital. So innovation is going to be stymied if you cannot provide easily available capital and invest on this. And on the peripherals, we see this kind of being activated. You've seen NSF, SBIR. You see on one side a lot of capital available. Same on the VC side, you see a lot of capital. But in the middle, as you come towards the everyday entrepreneur, I think we haven't innovated enough. And so I don't think I'm going to propose a solution here. I don't know. I think we're all going to co-create this. And I know there's so many brilliant minds, both on the panel and on the audience today, who are going to help break these barriers down. And of course, we've seen some foray into this, like some of the work that the SBA is doing to think about how do we better bring capital about, thinking about the definitions for how CDFIs hand out capital. So there is this nonprofit lending network out there nationally as well, but I don't think it is getting to the everyday entrepreneur. So I will pause on the opportunity here, and maybe through the course of our discussion, there'll be others that will chime in and also talk. And then I can put some links in the chat on some nationally recognized capital providers that our audience can get access to. But yeah, for me, the biggest opportunity today by far is capital access.
Thank you, David. Any of our other panelists want to chime in there? Nathan, I see you come off mute.
Yeah, so I want to certainly recognize what David said, and capital access is just a huge and critical piece to this puzzle. I want to kind of zoom out a little bit on this conversation and talk about what I view as one of the potentially biggest opportunities for this group to come together around. And that's around, quite frankly, the messaging around what entrepreneurship is, what it looks like and feels like. I think the average everyday person's assumption is it's high-tech, high-growth companies. When we all know in communities of all sizes across this country, there are small businesses that are not high-tech, high-growth, but add tremendous value for their community, and certainly obviously for those that they're employing. And so I think there's an opportunity to really redefine what entrepreneurship is to the average everyday person. So reintegrate that into the programs, the policies, the funding that flows to support this kind of work across the country.
Agreed, definitely. John or Susan, what are some of the service offerings, the barriers that you've seen that we're trying to take down here today? Susan, I see you've come up off of mute. What would you like to share with us?
Well, I think as horrible as the pandemic has been on entrepreneurs and small business, it really was eye-opening for people to know that Small Business Administration is a wealth of resource funding. People that benefited from the PPP loans, they didn't know that those resources were even there. So it was an education every day of, oh, I can do this. I didn't know I was eligible for this. So providing access and information to entrepreneurs and small business owners is vital. And I think the pandemic opened up a lot of eyes of what's out there to non-traditional funding. A lot of rural places, they may have one bank. And if you're not in a good credit standing or don't have collateral, how do you get capital? Well, you have to think outside the box and look for grant sources and other things that David had mentioned.
Definitely. Yeah, I think we are all more aware as a country right now of our small businesses and the opportunities and challenges there. John, why don't you round us out on this one?
Well, I gotta leverage what David and Nathan had to say in terms of access to capital, and what Susan had to say in terms of access to intelligence. Those are two of the three pillars of entrepreneurship. The other one's access to market. Libraries don't necessarily have the pipeline for capital, though I agree with you in terms of needing to work on those systems in order to find places for folks in the middle. The access to intelligence, though, is something that libraries certainly have. I mean, we could talk about databases and informatics all day long, but it's the access to market aspect of it in terms of lowering barriers that I think community anchor institutions can help with. Libraries in particular, I mean, when you think about it, there's 16,500 locations around this country. There's 9,000 main libraries, all the branches, 16,500 places for self-discovery. How to identify myself, perhaps as a hobbyist who wants to start a business, for training, for prototyping ideas, 16,500 parking lots for food truck businesses. And one of my favorite ones is the food truck business that started up outside of the Mid-Continent Public Library, outside of Kansas City, Missouri. One location, the fellow who started it had to do all of his classwork, file all his paperwork at the library, and then parked there for lunches. And it's amazing what happens when there's a community anchor institution that validates this person's business, has a built-in marketplace for it, and can help amplify it because they're going to market it. Hey, come to the library, bring your kids story time, then let's have some tacos. That kind of an approach, which is literally helping a small. He's now got 8 trucks and nearly 100 employees, and that one node in that little ecosystem, it's powerful. It's not access to capital through those community anchor institutions, but it certainly is the other two parts.
Yeah, definitely resources and finding ways to get resources beyond capital. Thank you, John. Looking forward and kind of building off of that one, we've talked about some of the issues that are out there, some of the challenges that we're facing, some of the opportunities, as David phrased it. But who do we know that's out there right now? And I'm going to ask you not to say yourself in this one, but who do we know? What program, services, and initiatives are out there that are really doing great work to help these ecosystems adapt to the emerging market opportunities that are there? And what are the real gaps that are still opportunities for another organization to see? What are those, who are our best practices, and what are the gaps that are still out there? I throw that to Nathan to talk a little bit about, from some of his experience, some of those best practices you've seen, Nathan.
So I'll talk about one that I have a role in, but it's not the IEDC, and that is Rural Rise. It's a network of nonprofits and for-profit, quite frankly, rural-focused entrepreneurship support organizations. So it's a network of folks that come together on a monthly basis, and when we're not in COVID times, in person at least once a year, to really do kind of peer-to-peer networking and learning among that group. It's a great group of folks. It's all rural and tribal focused, so it's small community focused, but a really great opportunity to learn from one another, to connect with others, and to make sure that you understand that you're not the only one in the country doing this work, that there's things you can learn from others. There's connections you can build that are going to benefit you and your community, and really, bring a lot of resources in a relatively small amount of time.
Definitely. It's been a very rewarding experience to be engaged with that organization. David, what I know you work with a lot of organizations across the country. What are some of the best practices you've seen out there? Who's doing it well?
By the way, shout out to Rural Rise. Love the work they're doing. Pre-pandemic, went to the one in Pine Bluff, had a great experience, and definitely looking forward to meeting in person this year. For me, I've got several that do great work, but one favorite of mine are community colleges. I love community colleges because on one side, you've got capital, but how do you make sure that capital works for you? Education. If you can combine education with capital, you have like an 80% probability from a 50% probability. These are not statistically valid numbers, FYI, it's just anecdotal. But community colleges help create a framework where you can actually learn and not have to make those mistakes. My second business is more successful than my first because I actually paid for all the bad mistakes I made, right? But if you go through the community college system, they can actually help you through a framework to not make those same mistakes and be able to learn from it. So when you combine education with capital, you can increase the success rate. And I see community colleges do such incredible work across the country. The idea that they're basically helping with this affordable loss, reducing the risk, right? And so you can increase the chances of not becoming poor in the process of becoming rich, right? So you're trying to create wealth, but you don't lose your house in the process of creating that. That's what community colleges do. They give you a safe space to work with people that are actually going to help you put a business plan together. Now, I've never written a business plan. When I say business plan, I mean like, a roadmap, right? They help you understand cash flow statements. They help you understand how to use QuickBooks. These are like simple things that can significantly prevent you from making mistakes that you can, actually end up creating more wealth. So I would say community colleges are such a great foundational element to entrepreneurship in this community and in our country. And one shout out to an organization that's bringing them all together is NACI. I know NACI was on a panel, I think, or is coming up on a panel this week. Love the work they're doing with entrepreneurship across the country. And even in my own backyard, Hillsborough Community College, where I live in Tampa, is doing incredible work with veterans. They're doing incredible work with other organizations. And I'm a huge fan. I personally graduated from a community college and cannot speak enough of the experience that you get there.
NACI, National Association of Community Colleges.
Sorry, okay, I've got 2 strikes against me. I've used way too many acronyms. Sorry, International Economic Development Council, Small Business Administration, Small Business Development Corporation. I know. And
it's never good when I come on, okay? It's never good, okay?
All right, 2 strikes, no more.
I'm just prepping for our calls tomorrow with all of the government agencies because I know what's going to happen. No offense, Susan. Sorry.
That was Joe Cap, co-chair of the National Entrepreneurship Week, that was coming on to scold the panelists live on air. Great point though, David. The entrepreneurs that I work with are passionate about being a barber or ceramics or photography or whatever. Very few of them are passionate about QuickBooks. So it really is a whole curve. So John, and you're not allowed to say libraries this time.
Oh, no. I'm a big fan of the USDA's, the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Rural Development Services. I'm a big fan of their approach. They empower ecosystem actors and providers at the same time that they're supporting individual entrepreneurs. The model, I think, is replicable, and it's something I'm jealous of. Yes, there's some work that we've been around on a program called Think Outside the Barn. It's a library-based one, but really the advantage that the USDA Rural Development Agency has is also, of course, that they can share IP, intellectual property, to help businesses find the thing that they want to innovate around. But the thing that they know, and it's a really hard fought, and from everything I've seen, a very hard won lesson, which is that access to capital, yes, but cutting the burn rate for businesses, in ag businesses especially, energy costs, just in that space alone, are so massive. And the drain on capital that happens when you're spending money on power and light and the manufacturing side of it and the ag business side of it, if you can, they also focus not just on the entrepreneurship ecosystem, but the ecosystem. So I'm really impressed with that. And they also have a focus on what does it mean to allow an entrepreneur to have some flexibility and freedom in their family life. There's a lot of focus on childcare, and I want to talk about that a little bit later when there's opportunities to talk about it. What do we want to do with our lives when we grow up? But the childcare side of it and transportation side of it, a big shout out. If anybody from U.S. Rural Development's on here, USDA Rural Development's on here, I'd love to shake your virtual hand.
We have an amazing state office of USDA Rural Development here in West Virginia. They've been fantastic supporters of the ecosystem and other programs I've run in, transforming agricultural technology and agricultural ecosystems. I agree totally, John. What a
Bill,
great
I got no business doing genetic engineering on strawberries, but I totally want to, and I read their blog.
All right, Susan, who's doing it well that you've worked with?
We actually have three that I'm very proud of. We have the Delta I Fund and the Arkansas Regional Innovation Hub and Codify. So Delta I Fund and Arkansas Regional Hub are obviously in Little Rock, and Codify is out of Cape Girardeau, Missouri. And they are incubators for entrepreneurs. And we funded them a couple of times and I've just lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. Regional Innovation Hub provides classes and workshops. So if you're interested in welding and want to build your skills, they have welding workshops. If you're interested in, other aspects of manufacturing or STEAM, they just provide a full service, from concept to business plan to in action. And Codify and Delta iFund are doing similar works like that.
Yeah, it's a really amazing work, and that skills training is so needed. And again, a previous life got to work at a manufacturing institute that helped prototype and do that side of it, but we also train machinists, welders, 3D printers, people who could have all those skills in manufacturing. It's incredibly important. And I guess as a sister program to the Delta Region Authority, I want to shout out to my own Appalachian Regional Authority, the Appalachian Regional Commission, who just has been a great partner in so much development here and entrepreneurship development through the power funds, through other funds here and throughout the 13 states of the Appalachian region. I think they need noted. Federal co-chair Gail Manchin is currently from West Virginia, and just an amazing commission doing wonderful work throughout the Appalachian region, much like you all do down in the Delta. Okay, we're going to get harder as we go, panel. So, we've given some softballs up front, but I think one of the things we've got to talk about is, we often talk about entrepreneurship as economies evolve locally, nationally, globally. We look at land, labor, capital, and technology in new and inventive ways. Specifically in the rural environment, those challenges is to get people to come together in those rural environments where you don't have the density, where you don't see it. Rural populations declining. Rural entrepreneurship is seeing a resurgence, but over the last decade has seen a decline. How are we going to work with organizations to invest in real systemic progress in our rural environments and really reverse this trend and build up our rural ecosystems? Nathan, I've got to come to you first because of your experience both with your prior employer and with Rural Rise.
Yeah, so I think this is just an incredibly important time to think about regional approaches and collaboration. For the longest time, communities have always focused on competition. I'm going to beat the community 2 miles, 5 miles, 10 miles down the road. And some of those are incentivized by, political realities. Some are incentivized by things like high school football rivalries. But we've got to figure out a way to be more collaborative, to find ways where when the community 5, 10, 15, even 25 miles down the road benefits, that you also are benefiting. And to think about approaches that really incentivize and drive regional collaboration, and conversations that haven't happened in decades are now starting to bubble up at the local level. It has to happen all the way from the local level, all the way through the policies and funding and programs that flow to those programs and communities from the federal, state, and local level. And we've got to think about how do we drive collaboration in much more intentional, focused, and strategic ways.
I agree completely. Great answer. Susan, did I see you pop in there quickly? No?
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. David, John, any thoughts on how we empower these rural environments and encourage entrepreneurship in these rural environments?
So we work in a few different rural communities, and two things for me bubble up. One, we're seeing that more and more rural communities are also becoming very attractive for remote work. So rural communities are now asking, okay, broadband was needed back then, but now broadband is urgent because you have people relocating, working from remote areas. And we talked to a few different rural economic development agencies that have seen a growth of people coming in who are not actually doing any work there, but are working for remote companies. So broadband now it was always important. It's even more important now. The other reason why it's important, and I think we've all heard about this, for telecommute, telemedicine, anything, we need broadband. I think that case has already been made. But the other case is also about storytelling. There's so much innovation happening in rural that doesn't get out. And we need to be able to capture some of these stories because that can drive investments back into rural. And I don't think we do a good job of kind of highlighting the wins that rural communities have around ag tech, or there's even biotech and other kind of this new age innovations that are happening through entrepreneurs moving back into rural communities. I think we've got to be able to capture that and highlight that. Yes, there is a scarcity of resource, but again, that can be alleviated today. There's a lot of digital mapping services. Your closest patent lawyer might be in Chicago if you're in the rural Midwest, but again, nowadays Zoom is a lot more prevalent, right? So some of those traditional barriers are coming down, but are we making sure that the digital infrastructure is in place to actually enable and facilitate that? And if we don't, we're going to continue to see, the same challenges we've always had. So I actually see this as a lot of opportunities. Kind of COVID has kind of helped them leapfrog those traditional barriers, and now they can play in a lot more of a level playing field.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to find the silver lining in the last couple of years, but connectivity and the realization that you can't have telehealth if you can't connect is definitely an important issue that we're working to address here at the West Virginia Department of Economic Development and throughout our state. So John, I see you with some thoughts.
Well, I look at places to get at the table when the table's got a diverse group of stakeholders at it. And I'm really trying to pay a lot of attention right now for our colleagues in state libraries around the Digital Equity Act and the requirements within the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, the Digital Equity Act within that, for planning that's comprehensive about the rollout of new digital backbones, new broadband backbones, as well as the equity parts of how do we teach people to use it? How do we support connectivity, not just connectivity, but digital literacy? Those elements, I think, are being supported at scale in every single state. And if you're doing education, you should be at the table. If you're doing healthcare, you should be at the table. If you're doing health and well-being, you should be at the table. Libraries, I'm dragging some of them, no offense to my colleagues, but the entrepreneurship ecosystem needs to be at that digital planning table. There's been a tremendous investment on the part of the current administration and Congress in the planning process. And I think we're going to be missing the boat if we are not looking to get involved at scale with our state offices of. And I'm not trying to lecture here, I'm trying to tip people off, because where the funding is going to flow on that digital equity side, the broadband side, the build out side, first mile, last mile, is going to be determined by that planning process. And if we don't bake entrepreneurship supports into it, and my day job is baking community anchor institutions into it, I think we will be kicking ourselves just even 3 to 5 years from now.
Yeah, I completely agree, John. I think that's right on, and the time is now. It's not 3 to 5 years from now, it's now. It's probably 2 weeks ago, but.
Well, it's always 2 weeks ago, but they didn't really put out the NOFA early enough, so let's catch up.
Definitely. Got a quote here, and I'm actually going to read it so that I make sure that I get it right. A recent article from the Harvard Business Review that says, if the goal is to harness the power of entrepreneurship to revitalize impoverished places, we need to think about entrepreneurial ventures not as investment vehicles designed to maximize return, but instead as collaborative platforms that enable us to leverage local resources in creative ways to address local or urgent local problems. This mindset shift has implications not only for how funders and advisors think about their new ventures, but also how policymakers support us. So I want to give an opportunity for Susan to talk about the new Delta Small Business Academy that's coming online soon. It very much grounded in this thought, and then if anyone else has opportunity to jump in, you can. But let's start with Susan here.
Okay, so just last Tuesday, we launched the RFP for the Delta Small Business Academy. We're looking for project partners to implement this academy. And our goal is this year will be a program development year and participant selection year. So 2023 will launch our first cohort of small business owners and entrepreneurs. And like I said earlier, we want to meet these problems where they are. And much like our Delta Leadership Institute Academy, we want to take business owners around the region to see other successes and other challenges and other obstacles that have been achieved and overcome and conquered. And through that, we want to also provide mentorship, because as a local business, you can't often go to the storefront next door and say, hey, what are you doing to succeed? But on a regional aspect, you can look at someone similar and say, how did you overcome this obstacle? How did you write your grant to get SBA funding? So the goal is to create a mentorship, a peer-to-peer network on a regional basis. So it's not the local competition that people have to deal with, that they, don't want to ask for help from their neighbor, but they can ask from a regional neighbor and get those answers. Also through the academy, we're going to have basic technical assistance as well, HR problems or HR, setting up HR standards. How many small businesses have a handbook when they start out? Well, they don't, because it's one or two people and, they're probably related, but as they expand, they need to address these issues and make sure that they're abiding by all regulations. Are they using best practices in accounting? So we're going to meet the basic needs and also the very specific needs of the individual business owners.
That's awesome. I think that's so important. And again, it goes back to the comment I made earlier. People get in because they're passionate about their business. They're not always, very few of us are passionate about the HR functions that come with our business. But it's so important that we have those skill sets developed for entrepreneurs in a way that they can approach and understand. And again, as they're building out, wealth in our local ecosystem, so important. David, Nathan, John, any thoughts on that one? If not, John gave me, I let all my panelists send in what I called a softball question. So we'll go to John now for a question very much tailored to John and every library. And John, you've spent a lot of time talking about the great work that libraries do, but what's a hidden gem about libraries that probably most of the people on this call don't know, and that everybody should uncover so that they can help their local ecosystem?
Bill, I'm glad you asked that question. Folks, if you're looking at ways to put community anchor institutions to work, remember that it's not just the place, and it's not just the technology, it's not just the information, it's the humans who work there who are themselves interested in being ecosystem builders. Granted, some of them are educational ecosystem builders. They put on a really good story time for kids. Some of them are cultural ecosystem builders. They'll do programming all day long. And some of them are business reference specialists. Some of them are the hand in glove supports for other government agencies, education organizations. The whole life of the entrepreneur is supported by those people who work there. It is interesting to me how the hidden gem of libraries is the librarians themselves.
Yeah, that's amazing. I grew up with rural libraries, and it was very important to a kid in rural West Virginia. I remember when mine was built. I remember getting my first card at the Western Regional Libraries in Putnam County, West Virginia.
Yeah.
It's such, and still have it today. Still engaged constantly. So
yeah,
super important.
The core of it all is, hey, I'm looking for some information, and to have that assistance. I'm looking for an idea to workshop an idea. To have that assistance. God bless Google, but you sometimes need the things that are on the hidden web. You sometimes need some things that only an expert knows.
The things that you don't know to ask. Google only knows what you ask. It doesn't know what you should be asking.
There you go, Bill. I'm gonna put you on a commercial for that. Thank you.
I will second that, by the way, because when I started the second business, I actually went to the library, and yes, they help with research, etc. They also have free conference rooms you can get. Like, when you're starting out, you don't want to spend any money. And there's so many free resources. I'm such a huge fan of the library system. I think it's one of those not talked about resources, but I see a lot of entrepreneurs end up there doing market research. For example, you can help, understand, is there a market for your product? How big is your market for your product? All that stuff. And also all the free spaces available. We just took our daughter, 4 years old, to the library for the first time, and she saw she could get free comics there that we could read to her. So it can be more than just entrepreneurship. It can be building blocks for the community, but also can be a pivot point within the community. So huge shout out for the work that the libraries do.
And big ups to Tampa. I'll tell them through the grapevine that you guys are fans. That's awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. We're going to circle back to Nathan. I think I skipped him on an answer there. So Nathan, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the investments that communities are making and how policymakers can work to support the entrepreneurial system?
Thanks, Bill. I wanted to circle back from what Susan had kind of been referencing, and that is, when we think about investment, and we think about investment from a private sector standpoint, a public sector standpoint, and even a nonprofit philanthropic perspective, each of those plays a very specific and different role in this process. And we're at a time and a moment where we have unprecedented resources coming from the federal government. There's a brand new program that just rolled out last year from the Small Business Administration called the Community Navigator Program, which is going to bring resources to lots of regions across the country. The Economic Development Administration is providing a ton of resources on this. USDA.
The problem of rural bandwidth may have jumped up and got us there. Yeah, I think Nathan got pushed off. We're going to blame that on Joe Cap. But let's go on. I think Nathan will probably try and jump back in here in a second. But one of the areas we haven't addressed at this point that we need to talk about is, that people of color have struggled. Kaufman has done so much work on people of color struggling to build intergenerational wealth because of the systemic barriers that are out there. How do we make sure that our ecosystems are supportive and in addressing these barriers and making progress toward making sure that there is equal access? Susan, David, John, anybody, Susan?
From our standpoint with the Small Business Academy, we are going to target our recruitment to minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and any other marginalized groups. We want to work with HBCUs. We want to work with minority networking groups to help us identify these people and these groups that need that extra help or need the technical assistance. So that is one of our primary goals with the Academy, is to outreach to minorities and marginalized groups.
University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff is an amazing institution. I worked with them for a long time when I was in the 1899 grant system. They're a simply amazing university.
Yeah, we're fortunate. We have 3 HBCUs in Arkansas, UAPB, along with Lander Smith College and Arkansas Baptist College. My previous life, I was part of the Arkansas Higher Education Department. So I have great contacts with them and look forward to working with them some more.
That's awesome. Lander Smith's a beautiful campus right there in Little Rock. David?
Yes, after Access to Capital, this is my second soapbox, which is breaking down barriers for underrepresented entrepreneurs. I am myself an immigrant entrepreneur and saw how hard it is to start a business here in the US. I think one of the reasons, I think there's 2, there could be many, but I can highlight 2 reasons why I think this is a big challenge. One, the rules of engagement are not written to highlight the challenges that the underrepresented communities face. Now, you don't need to create separate rules. You just need to create rules that address the lowest common denominator, right? This a story that I love talking about, I think a lot of people have heard about, the curb cut effect. If you've not heard about the curb cut effect, you should go Google it. Essentially, when you make these kind of on-ramps on your sidewalks for people with disabilities to be able to use wheelchairs, etc., you find that 9 out of 10 people end up using that curb cut, including women or men with strollers, joggers, people with pets, etc. So when you build for the lowest common denominator, you actually help everybody in the community. You're not taking resources away. If you look at PPP, for example, right? Like 2 of the most common requirements early on, at least, you need to have a trusted banking relationship and you need to have cash flow statements. We know from running polls in our communities that a lot of underrepresented communities did not have these 2 to start with. So you can't even get them to the starting point because the rules of engagement have not been written correctly. So if we want to talk about breaking down barriers to access for underrepresented communities, you don't have to go find new solutions. We just have to make sure that the solutions we offer truly are inclusive and that we've thought about access. And it's not just underrepresented communities that might be people of color, BIPOC founders. It's also rural. It's also people with disabilities, new citizens, returning citizens. There are studies that show if you have a program for returning citizens, recidivism rate drops by 2/3, right? So we are helping the community as a whole when we think of the least of us. But I don't think we think of programming that way. And I think that has been the single biggest barrier to getting people not to finish the race, to the starting line. So when we talk about wealth creation, the people that had the most money became twice as rich during COVID, right? So I know I'm on a soapbox here. I apologize. I think I'm preaching to the choir, but I think, those are the things we need to think about, is what are the rules we're writing for engagement when we talk about access to capital or access to technical assistance? Are we accounting for the lowest common denominator?
Yeah, it's a great soapbox to be on, though, David, and you're exactly right. And I'll point out that the next panel on Ecosystem Day, headed by my good friend Sonia Moyne, is gonna focus on some of those issues as well, and access and the research base behind these development programs. John.
Well, I was just going to comment on how I think SBA gets it right when they look at the foundational skills pyramid before they get into industry skills or higher level skills. The entrepreneurship investments that happen in a lot of places, unfortunately, are looking for people who are themselves already ready, and more investments need to be made in that tier. Well, the tier one is K-12. It's what folks like EntreEd are doing in terms of an entrepreneurship mindset in grade school and middle school and high school, but it's also investments in education. But the tier two around academic competencies and around tier three on the SBA pyramid around workplace competencies, we have to be investing in those. Otherwise, you could have the best idea in the world. You can have the world's greatest side hustle. It's ready to go, except you're not going to be able to find that capital moment or that hobbyist to entrepreneur pipeline without that. And I think the ecosystem funders in particular need to be investing a little bit lower down on the pyramid in order to pull people up.
Yeah, it has always been, as a service provider throughout my career, it has always been a challenge when I was trying to get new funding for programs, new initiatives, especially in agricultural technology, things like that. One of the first questions that, as I would talk to funders many times, I would get, well, over 3 years, how many jobs is this going to create? And I would always say, if that's your metric for building up this ecosystem, then we're probably not talking to the right person. We've got to look at how we're building out in our communities, how we're building strength and capacity in our communities, and not always go to the lowest hanging fruit. As David said, it sets up a precedent where the system starts wrong and you can't get to the right side of it. I see Nathan has jumped back in. We thought Joe Cap had made you angry, Nathan. I don't know if you have anything else to talk about. We thought Joe might have kicked you out for something you said, but we're glad to see you back. Do you have any, since you're back, do you have any closing comments or closing thoughts for us as we begin to wrap up?
Just again, really excited to be a part of this conversation. I think IEDC, International Economic Development Council, is really here to engage, to collaborate, to find ways to continue to raise the importance of these issues up, both from a policy perspective, from a practical perspective, and from a collaboration perspective. I think you always have to be willing to reach out, to be not just inviting people to your table, but showing up at other people's tables. And so wherever we can be helpful and supportive in that way, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're just excited and thrilled to be a part of this conversation.
Thank you, Nathan. We're very glad to have you at the table. Susan, any final thoughts as we close out today?
Yeah, DRA was fortunate enough to be part of the infrastructure law. So there will be, more programming that'll come ahead. They're all working on the spending plans, but we look at our goal as a holistic approach to the local economies. We can't just fix one thing without addressing another thing. We can't have viability without sustainability. So we have to, have a strong workforce, but also a healthy workforce, and we have to have skill sets and the life experiences there as well. No one wants to go to a town with no restaurant, so it's got to be the whole thing. So that's what DRA is doing to help small business, workforce, health, all of it.
Yeah, again, we've got to grow our communities as we're growing our entrepreneurial endeavors. David, we'll come to you.
Yeah, well, thank you, National Entrepreneurship Week, Joe, Amber, all of you. I know it's a lot of work to put up an event like this, but this is such an important conversation. And this whole week is filled with such great content. So thank you for having us and making entrepreneurship easy and accessible across the United States and across the world. I'll say, we're all coming together to talk about these really important topics. And I think that's how we're going to find the solution. So thank you for having me on the panel.
Thank you, David. John, we'll give you the last shot to close it out.
I'm just going to go back to what everybody else said about access to capital. I'm looking forward to Friday's funder panel very much. And of course, running a nonprofit organization, I'm wondering if there's a little something there. But looking at how the ecosystem gets built, what makes the world go around? Joe Cap.
It's a funny story, and I'll close out my thoughts with this. Is about 5 years ago, I was at a conference. I was running a program that was all about agricultural technology and how we had to get better at solving some food equity and access problems, and we could do that through agricultural technology. And I'm at a conference, and all of a sudden this skinny guy gets up on stage and starts talking. I'm like, dude, you're giving my speech. What? And went up and talked to him then. And it's been a long, enjoyable 5 or 6 years now working with Joe on issues from agricultural technology to curricular development and the system. So thank you to Joe and Amber for allowing me to work with this incredible panel, and really blessed. And I hope everybody stays around. You're about to hear from Sonia Moyne, who is absolutely one of the best people in the country on what she does. So excited.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for your for facilitating, and thank you guys for your really nice remarks. I just wanted to go ahead and also just recognize Goldman Sachs 10,000 small businesses. When we talk about sort of national ecosystems, first of all, they're a contributor, but they've had over 12,400 businesses go through their program, and their metrics are just absolutely amazing. And a lot of the business owners learn from other business owners. So when we talk about ecosystem builders, it's the libraries, it's the community colleges, it's the government, but it's also the other business owners and how they come together in order to go ahead and encourage entrepreneurship. As Bill said, we have our next program coming up, which is at 3 p.m. on policy and capital and how do we make ecosystems healthier. Tomorrow is going to be packed full day of all of our federal folks from a variety of different agencies. So make sure you attend that, because that is chock full of information about programs and resources from over 30 federal government agencies. And it's just a fantastic day. On Thursday, we're highlighting and spotlighting everyday entrepreneurs. These are folks who are doing amazing things, and it really runs the gamut. From individual folks who are running individual companies to Kara Golden, who started Hint Water. I have her book right over here, $150 million company. Can't really see it because of the CGI. We have Norm Lewis, who's a creative artist, who's going to come in and talk about what does it mean to be a creative entrepreneur, a great series of programs. And then, as John said, we have on Friday, Funding Friday. We're going to hear from a host of folks. The SEC, the SBA, Treasury is going to kick us off. We're going to learn about bootstrapping. And then we have how to get access to outside capital. It's going to be kicked off with our friends from Goldman Sachs, 10,000 small businesses. How do folks go ahead and get funding from outside panels? So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Amber, but I want to go ahead and just reiterate my thanks for all of you for taking your time and your energy for joining us today and sharing your wisdom. We absolutely appreciate it. Amber, back to you.
Great, thank you. So for all of our attendees, I hope you stay on. We have about a 3-minute transition period while we get our 3 p.m. panel all set up and make sure their audio and video is working, but please stay on and join us for our final conversation of the day on research and data and how it can really benefit entrepreneurship ecosystems. So Sonia, do you want to go ahead and make sure your panelists are all squared away, and we'll get you all pinned? Just so you know, attendees that are staying on are able to hear us.
Thanks, everyone. Sorry for the hiccup.
You're fine, you're fine, Nathan. It was good. It was good. Give everyone a laugh. All right.
Organizationally, we're like a diamond that's almost ready. You know, it's like in that in between coal stage, and that's okay. We're okay with it. It's all entrepreneurial. It's all entrepreneurial. We're making it happen here. That's all that matters.
I think that's what
Thanks
it
to
needs
y'all.
be.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Make sure I get everyone pinned here. It needs pinned.
What a great panel. Really, really great.
Thank you for having
information.
me.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Susan. We appreciate it.
See y'all
We'll see you
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
We'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Do you want to just do a quick tech check, make sure everyone's video and audio are working?
Yeah, sounds good. Can you hear me good? Hear me well?
Yeah.
Awesome.
And we will have like a 5-minute intro max, and then I'll hand it over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And just a quick reminder that while we're waiting to get started, this is being recorded and portions of this will be, well, a lot of it will be also downloaded later on for folks. So just remember it is being recorded. We have live mics right now. And we're excited about this panel. We had a great panel yesterday. Amber led on Beyond the Classroom Entrepreneurship with Babson folks and Richard Bliss talking about a number of different things, including, that's where I got some of those statistics about the Goldman Sachs program, but also the great stuff that they're doing. So we are super excited to have you all here today to talk about this particular topic. It's great.
Well, it's the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and get us live streaming, and then we will be good to go. I just want to introduce everyone to our final panel of Entrepreneurship Ecosystems Day. It has been an awesome lineup. We've had a lot of continuity across the different panels, so I think you'll find that this panel will be really helpful in crafting some of the data needs of our ecosystems and really talking about how we can inform those ecosystems through data. So my name is Amber Ravenscroft. I am the co-chair of National Entrepreneurship Week along with Joe Kapp. We want to do a quick introduction on what National Entrepreneurship Week is, and then we will go ahead and dive right in. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll be right back.
Welcome to National Entrepreneurship Week. My name is Joe Kapp.
And I'm Amber Ravenscroft.
5 years ago, we relaunched National Entrepreneurship Week, a congressionally chartered annual event to support and uplift America's new business startups. Originally founded in 2006, National Entrepreneurship Week takes place every year during the third week of February.
All across the United States, from Maui to Miami to Maine and everywhere in between, America's entrepreneurial ecosystem is vibrant and thriving. National Entrepreneurship Week celebrates the unmatched, innovative American spirit that has brought to life amazing products and services and includes a beautiful tapestry of diverse entrepreneurs.
During the week, you'll hear from a host of United States federal agencies as they share information on their entrepreneurship and small business programs. You'll also hear from a nationwide network of partners, including entrepreneurial educators, ecosystem builders, and most importantly, entrepreneurs from all walks of life as they participate in the excitement of National Entrepreneurship Week.
Join in celebrating National Entrepreneurship Week by organizing an event in your local community, listening in on one of our national webinars, or participating in our annual social media campaign.
There has never been a better time to start a new business, and we challenge you to unleash your ideas into action during National Entrepreneurship Week.
National Entrepreneurship Week is made possible by contributions from an array of generous partners. Views and opinions expressed in National Entrepreneurship Week programs are those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of National Entrepreneurship Week, its agents, or any U.S. government agency. Any agency's participation or support is not an endorsement of any product, service, or entity. All liability with respect to any recommendations are hereby expressly disclaimed. All right, so we'll go ahead and dive in. These panelists really are going to speak for themselves, but I do want to just quickly recognize, Sonia, your partnership and support of this. The Initiative for a Competitive Inner City has been a great partner along with Goldman Sachs in supporting National Entrepreneurship Week 2022. And we could not have done it without you. And so we just want to recognize you, and I'll throw it over to you to introduce your amazing panelists.
Thank you so much, Amber. And so I just want to say, I've been, part of the eShip community for so many years, and it's just amazing to be here and lead a panel at the National Entrepreneurship Week conference. So I just feel like I made it, so thank you all. I also want to thank Bill, who led the last session. It's been amazing working with him and just everybody else that he knows in West Virginia on our common mission. But more importantly, I want to thank you guys for joining today and my panelists. Thank you so much for this conversation. As USDA tweeted today, thank you for that. Our research and data can create a stronger, more equitable network for entrepreneurs. As I mentioned, I am so excited to be joined by 3 leaders in this space representing research, practitioners, and policymakers. No one is getting left behind in this conversation, guys. I'll actually ask my panelists to introduce themselves, and as always, share why is entrepreneurship important to you personally, or what excites you most about it. But before that, I'd like to introduce myself. I know Amber did a little bit. So I am Senior Director at the Initiative for a Competitive Inner City, and in my role, I oversee 2 business education programs. One being the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses, which is a proud sponsor of this year's National Entrepreneurship Week. And ICIC is a national research nonprofit organization. We integrate research and business development programs to create jobs, income, and wealth for local residents, but especially focusing in our under-researched communities. And personally for me, what really excites me about Entrepreneurship Week is that I truly believe, and this is why I've been working in this space for the last 20 years, is that it can be a pathway to build generational wealth for people from all different backgrounds. Especially as myself, as an immigrant, I've really seen the impact that entrepreneurship can make in our community. So Howard, I'll actually start with you for the introduction as an extension of ICIC, and then Awasta, and then Paul.
Sure, thanks, Sonia. I'm Howard Weil, Research Director of ICIC, and what really matters to me about small business and entrepreneurship is that they are really the economic and social backbone of under-resourced communities, which are where ICIC does most of its work. And they're especially important for communities of color. They not only make economic contributions, create jobs for local residents, help keep spending within the community, sometimes bring new spending in from outside the community, help people of color build wealth. But at least as important as all that, and even speaking as an economist, I would say that at least as important as the economic contributions are the social contributions. In many under-resourced communities, entrepreneurs and small businesses are the social backbone of their communities. They help create and foster social connections among community residents. And that is, as I said, at least as important as the economic contributions that they make.
Well, I was can you hear me? Awesome. Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Sonia. My name is Awasta Sarkash, and I'm the Government Affairs Director at Small Business Majority. Small Business Majority is a national small business organization that empowers America's diverse entrepreneurs to build a thriving and equitable economy. We engage a network of over 85,000 small businesses and 1,500 business and other partner organizations to advocate for public policy solutions and to deliver resources to entrepreneurs that promote equitable small business growth. I think our deep connections with the small business community, along with our scientific research, enable us to educate the public about key issues impacting America's entrepreneurs. I think what I'm most excited about in terms of entrepreneurship actually is the new onslaught of all these entrepreneurs entering the small business ecosystem and hopefully addressing the existing disparities for small business owners across the country in hopes that we can sort of better support our communities and what small businesses offer to those communities. Thanks.
Okay.
Hey, Sonia. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to talk about this ever-growing important topic. I'm Paul Jones, and I am the Business Support Network Director with Invest Detroit. Invest Detroit is a multifaceted, mission-based capital provider, as well as a registered CDFI. And the Business Support Network Office is a derivative of a program or a fund that was launched by the New Economy Initiative. So in 2021, in the spring, the New Economy Initiative launched a $20 million fund to support the ecosystem. It's called the Inclusive Small Business Support Network Fund. And it is designed to provide reliable operating support to small business support organizations that inclusively and effectively provide services for underserved businesses throughout Wayne County, which is the Wayne County host, amongst other cities, Detroit. So there was a need and a clear articulated need to not only to help the business support network system or business support organizations that then sort of democratize the resources and ensure that they are accessible for various sectors of the population and various entrepreneurs. So in my role, I lead and manage the stewardship and coordination of this business support network. And I also convene, assess the needs of the ecosystem, and where there are gaps, work proactively to make sure those gaps are filled through providing various resources, including grant and capital funding, as well as other resources such as capacity building and data. So extremely happy to be here. Entrepreneurship has always burned deep in me. I don't even say recovering entrepreneur because I don't think you ever recover from it, but it has been the major source of how I've been able to generate and accumulate a certain portion of wealth. And I see it as a major gateway. I also see in this new dimension that we're in, where entrepreneurs, solopreneur, and different of the phrase of the economy are joining to the entrepreneurship realm. And I think having a proper support infrastructure of care is so important as more people enter the space, especially people of color who have been traditionally and systematically underserved. So I'm extremely excited to be here, extremely excited to join this wonderful panel.
I'm just so excited to have you all. I think this will be a great conversation. There's just so many things to learn from all of you. I'll actually open the panel, Howard, turning to you. Just given, everything Paul and Austin, you mentioned, as a research nonprofit organization, right, ICIC, and not just ICIC, but anyone in the space who do similar work, you support various stakeholders, grantors, both from public to private to nonprofit organizations. Your work helps them to understand the need and the challenges in their community as it relates to entrepreneurship. So I'm very curious to hear from you. What are some of the recent research topics or trends you're seeing that are being requested by the stakeholders? In the last session, they also touched on anchor institutions. As all these organizations with the desire to learn more about their communities so that they can respond accordingly to the current entrepreneurship climate.
Sure. Let me just fairly quickly mention half a dozen areas of interest that are coming from the public sector, the private sector, and the nonprofit sector. One is the continuing impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on small businesses, especially Black-owned businesses and businesses owned by other people of color. Even if, as we all hope, the pandemic starts to recede, there's going to be a kind of long COVID that some of these businesses are going to face, and there's going to be a continuing need for assistance and for research on which businesses need that kind of assistance. So that's one area, and a little bit later on in the program, I'll be talking about some of the research that we've done here at ICIC to help meet that need. Second area of interest has been small business financing options, particularly as businesses recover from COVID or seek to recover from the COVID pandemic, they are going to have even greater needs than they did before for financing. And what kinds of financing do they need, and what, where can they get that financing is going to be a continuing area. And we have a report on that topic coming out from ICIC next month. Third area is small business technical assistance policy, especially policy to help small businesses owned by people of color survive and thrive. And we have a report on that topic coming out in a few weeks as well. And connected to that, we're starting to see some interest in evaluation of existing small business technical assistance programs, especially programs that were started during the pandemic. What did they accomplish for the businesses that they sought to aid? There's, of course, as you mentioned, continuing interest in anchor institutions. We did a report on for-profit companies, large for-profit companies as anchor institutions last September. There's continuing interest in that topic, and there's growing interest in how those anchor institutions, whether they're for-profit companies or hospitals or universities or state and local governments, how they can use their procurement power to help promote small businesses and businesses owned by people of color. So that's another important area. Yet another one is the Great Resignation. And I'll be talking about this again next Thursday at a webinar that will be sponsored by the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation. But briefly, are small businesses having more trouble hiring people than they did? And is that a brake on their ability to expand? What is the quality of jobs in small businesses anyway, and how can it be improved? Is there help that small businesses need in reorganizing their operations to help them create better jobs, to help them better recruit workers? So that's yet another area, and we're just starting some work on that topic right now. And then finally, a relatively new area is the American Rescue Plan Act. We're seeing interest in both policy ideas for how states and ultimately local governments should spend American Rescue Plan Act funding, but also some local governments are looking down the road and saying or asking how they should evaluate the spending that they do of American Rescue Plan Act funding. And that's something that we've been hearing some interest from, or a topic on which we've been hearing some interest as well. So a whole variety of topics are bubbling up from within the field.
Yeah, I think that really gives them an overview of what we're seeing from the funders, right, or the stakeholders. Would love to kind of turn to the other side of the table, and I have a question for you, Asta, just because small business majority, you guys engage both community partners, the stakeholders that Howard mentioned, as well as small businesses to advocate for public policy and solutions. So you're also checking the pulse of the community through research and surveys, but focusing on small business owners as well. One of the issue, I know you and I both talked about is that with research and storytelling through data, data can become irrelevant so quickly, even just a year, right? So, and I know you guys collect so much data and the research that you do as well. How do you keep it current? Like, what are some of the most pressing needs maybe you're seeing with the business owners through the work you've been doing currently?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it has to do a lot with what you noted, keeping track of the pulse of the community. So much of that has to do with partnerships, particularly with state and local organizations, technical assistance providers, chambers, and so on, who can sort of speak to the specifics about what they're seeing. Similarly, following regular federal updates, for instance, on small businesses, which we hadn't seen as much news on prior to the pandemic, but now we hear about new programs, new regulations, new forms of capital, and so on, that we can kind of continue to engage with our small businesses on those sorts of updates to see how they feel about those types of programs. And that gets to my sort of final piece here about keeping things relevant, staying as engaged with small businesses as possible. So we do regular check-ins with our network, and obviously that can be difficult with a robust network, but we have sort of programmatic ways we do that. So for instance, we have a National Small Business Council and 2 other state councils in Georgia and Virginia. And so these are entities and platforms for small businesses to be able to bring to us their stories, illuminating the issues that they're facing. And it's always important to sort of keep it open mind about those issues, because we have a really robust policy agenda, but not everything always is incorporated into that. And so keeping a pulse on maybe not what's exactly right in line with the issues that we're focused on, but at least tangentially, because those sorts of things are always very intertwined with the work that we do. I think in terms of the most pressing needs, I think the most immediate is navigating the pandemic, not surprisingly. Our research indicates that small businesses are continuing to navigate the pandemic. Our survey from August of last year found that 1 in 5 small businesses still said that their business conditions were on the decline compared to the previous month, because they still have a ton to recover from, a 2-year pandemic. And so I think that speaks to the bigger need about how to cover all your bases as a small business owner. Like, where do I go to get responsible and affordable access to capital? How can I compete with larger businesses that offer benefits, but I don't, because there are no state programs that support things like paid leave and so on. And so I think that sort of coupled with continuing to recover are probably the most pressing needs. And I think continuing to have those conversations with partners and small businesses helps keep data relevant and also interesting to not just practitioners, but also small business owners themselves.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Great Resignation is new, but workforce development challenges, as Howard, you mentioned, is really not new in that sense. Working with small business owners, they've always had a challenge in attracting talent. Just with what you said, how do you pay and how do you offer those benefits to compete with the large businesses? Howard or one of you or both of you, do you think some of these trends and needs have changed over the last 10 years, or are we trying to still solve the same issues?
I'll say that I'm not sure that these needs have changed. I think they've just been exacerbated. We know small businesses were struggling to find affordable forms of responsible and lines of credit before, and look what happened during the pandemic. There was more capital available than ever, but at the beginning it wasn't really distributed equitably. There were also a lot of predatory lenders years ago, and they're even more prevalent now. And we know 10 years ago that things like childcare was expensive, and now more than ever, people, particularly women again, are leaving their jobs to deal with the cost of childcare. And the other side of that too is that many childcare providers are women, and often women of color, who are toeing that line between increasing fees to sustain their business and then losing clientele. So ultimately, I think this is just sort of a continuation or a snowball effect, if you will, of what were issues we didn't properly address before, and that's sort of all playing out right now.
Just bubbling, it's just really fast and just a lot. Paul, I'd love to turn to you, as one of practitioners here. You've worked in the nonprofit sector, and then as the past executive director of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program in Detroit, actually, the importance of collecting data. All grantees are held to high standards when it comes to reporting impact. Very curious to hear, in your work at Invest Detroit with the New Economy Initiative Fund, do you find that the needle is moving to a similar direction for impact reporting, or is the onus still on folks like us, like, small business majority, like ICIC, to show how programming technical assistance can have or lead to long-term or medium-term impact?
Yeah, that's a great question. I certainly think that there is a mindset shift that is occurring. In the current state, and certainly in the past, there's been more of a lean towards activity-based reporting. And now we're starting to see more of a shift towards what type of outcomes in the midterm and impact in long term are occurring. And just to be clear, when you look at the type of data that's collected, it's around traditionally again around activity, how many businesses walk through our doors, how many one-on-one hours did we administer, how many people attended a webinar. And this is supplemented, of course, by your typical or various demographic information that helps you put a little bit of color and richness to that data. Now we're seeing, and we're certainly advocating and pushing and almost mandating that there's more outcome-based reporting, but that's intentional. You can't think about that after the fact and say, let's start measuring outcome. It has to be part of the design process. It has to be part of the implementation process. And so it's extremely intentional because it's what happens after the businesses leave the TA nest. But that means you also have to have a baseline so you can determine the effect. But I also think the mind shift is happening from the funder level as well. So funders, typically, we provide a lot of information about the different businesses we've engaged with, that we've touched, from different sectors, different diversity aspects, and usually come a nicely bound, colorful report that we all feel great about. But I think that the question is, how are those businesses impacted in the medium and long term? And I think that as funders, we're communicating with them that, yes, we will certainly express and describe through data all the activities that we've accomplished throughout the year. But when we're looking at longer term and more another aspect of return on investment of institutional investment is, let's track these entrepreneurs and let's figure out what that looks like. Now, of course, one of the things that I've learned through various roles, especially with the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program, is that it's often much more difficult to capture that data after they leave the nest. I think that we need to ensure that our mission-based lenders have tools where they can capture it, because they tend to have a longer term relationship, assuming that the business owners are giving them their financial statements and paying down their capital commitments. So I think, again, and then also having a certain data validation set. So we're asking similar questions in similar ways so that the data is usable, that it is structured, and that we can pull insights from it. So I do think the mindset is shifting. But I also think that especially, as I think Howard mentioned, there's a lot of money coming out into the ecosystem, and a lot of different programs that are coming to bear. So I am extremely interested in seeing one of Howard's many reports about how our ecosystem has performed, and also doing our part in harvesting and curating data to further that research.
Yeah, actually, well, I hope it's okay for you to talk about this. Alesta mentioned, just what does the data say, right? That the storytelling behind the data, and especially when the PPP loan came out and EIDL loan came out, there were a lot of predatory lenders, and you've been able to unearth some of that for the Detroit ecosystem. You were actually quite involved in collecting and analyzing the impact of the PPP loans in Detroit. I think would love for everybody else to hear about your work, what you were trying to highlight by really digging through that data for the investment stakeholders, and to show how it is or it isn't impacting the entrepreneurs it's meant to impact.
That project ignited this unhealthy data obsession. And it came about, I'll be honest, that I didn't go in with a ton of theories that I was trying to prove out. I mean, anecdotally, it was told that certain businesses were left out. There was a lot of outcry. And what piqued my interest was initially there was only a limited amount of data that was available. And I think it was the fall or winter of 2020 through court order, the Treasury/SBA released everything names. And I said, wow, that's an incredible amount of data that's going to be available. I mean, unprecedented amount. But what was even more unprecedented to me was the real time aspect of it, because I think we knew that there was more funding that was going to come through the pipeline. It was certainly telegraphed. So in my mind, I said, again, we understand that entrepreneurship is a gateway to wealth. And one of the other gateways is home ownership. We saw in the last crisis that many people, especially people of color in those communities, were left without the equity in their home. And this is stuff we teased out over years and months, years, and almost 10 years later, we're still trying to figure out what exactly went wrong. And of course, now we have all these studies out. I guess in 100 years from now, if this happens again, we'll be well prepared. But in this case, I said, we can do something with this data like right now. We can course correct real time. So, and all this data was available, not really neatly packaged. There was about 6 million rows of data across about 6 different CSV files. And there's a lot of work to be done, but what came out went beyond disturbing to, I would say, to the point of being disgusting. And it highlighted very clear what was the sentiment that was out there. But what was interesting is that this was right on the heels of round 2. So I'd say the first round, let's say if we're naive, we say, okay, we were in reactive form. How do we use this information to impact change, which is always the goal of data. It's like you don't get a loan to get a loan. You get a loan to build something, right? You don't use data just so you can say, I got a lot of great data. You're using it to impact change. So this was like a real, almost once in a lifetime opportunity to impact change. So anyway, we shared this information, again, democratized it, put it out in the ether, and it just, I guess, went viral in a way. And I still hear stories about, we call out these banks to the carpet and we use this, but we want to see how do we use that information to change course correct round 2. And just to make a very long story, just a little bit longer, a lot of change was put in place in the city of Detroit about making sure there was awareness for the new round of PPP data, to make sure all of these, that some of our initiatives were taking hold. And we were tracking really closely how much more uptake what there was. Now, the good thing is that Detroit and most inner cities were extremely successful in increasing the amount of PPP funding that went to smaller businesses and businesses where it's predominantly occupied by people of color. So everybody's high-fiving and slapping each other in the back, and we want to see which are the banks we need to give credit to. And then that's when some of the dark clouds started to surface. And I think it goes to what my fellow panelists said, that we noticed that many of the banks weren't the ones that stepped up, but it was many of the non-traditional lenders. FinTech played a big role, and some of the organizations hadn't even existed much before PPP, but came into existence. Some of them had, I'm not in a place to characterize, but I would say some of them had very much predatory lending tendencies prior to PPP. So now it's like, how do we use the same data to supply to our technical assistance providers and make sure that any people who didn't have a banking relationship or who had to go to alternative means and into institutions that weren't as community friendly, let's call it, how do we make sure that they don't go down the road that we've been trying so long to not get them, and make sure they stay within this infrastructure of care. So it's been again, I would say in that case, data was really like the anecdotes, like an onion. The more I peeled, the more layers there were, and the more I cried. But I think it was pretty useful, and hopefully affected change.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, it still just gives me the chills of your findings when you really digged into the data and And I love what you said, that data is there to impact change and not just be something that we're just doing just because it's good to do, or it's because we have our reporting requirements from our funders. I just throw this question out there for anyone to take. Just given, Paul, your experience that you just shared, what role do you guys think both government and the private sector can play in ensuring that we are utilizing data properly, or even maybe in collaboration with us in terms of collecting data and the storytelling and ultimately making that impact?
I will jump in at the risk of having the audience get tired of my voice, but I will try to keep it short. One, I think that there's a lot more data, unprecedented amount of real-time data out there that we should lean heavily into. The other thing that we've seen is that there's a lot more creativity about using data in supplementing, in some cases, reducing our reliancy and sometimes bias-based surveys. So we saw at the early stages of the pandemic, even Wall Street firms, I wouldn't say scrapped, but couldn't rely on their economic models as much. They were going to create spaces like how many TSA passengers boarded flight these days, or open book, or what's it called, open table reservations were made. And they were using that to make predictions. And I think that the onus is on us to find creative ways to harvest data. One of the projects I have is that, one, using data just to figure out who's out there. We often know who comes to our table, but there's a lot of people on the fringe and a growing amount of businesses that aren't on our radar. But we can scrape data from Google, which is a project we have, from businesses that are registered in social media, and then cross compare that with, are these businesses registered? Have they gotten PPP? Are they well positioned to access more resources, which, as the other two panelists said, are coming through the pipeline? If we don't use this in a creative way to get more resources to where they're needed, then shame on us, right? So I think that we have to be creative. And also, I think, like I said, we can use the same data to provide more gap analysis and feed that up to policymakers. So I think, of course, it has to be supplemented with the real voice of the small business owner, with that sentiment that comes from having those discussions. But I think we can use that data to feed upwards to policymakers, but also feed downwards, where we have this list of, again, PPP information. It's detailed, not just on a macro level, but block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood. We know exactly who's getting what resources and who's not. And I think that to stay up with the times, and we just have to use it and democratize it in the way for good purposes.
I was going to say, I think part of it too, and to Paul's point, is putting importance and support behind that data and research, and sort of underscoring that, because I think we sort of get lost in, is this burdensome to make these sort of requirements? And it's sort of, what it reminds me of is like Community Reinvestment Act, 1071, all these sorts of things that are really critical in our understanding. But there's always this sort of messaging about, is this burdensome? But the reality is for us to really understand where the gaps are, there has to be a willingness to provide that information in order for us to be able to address the needs of very different communities across the country.
Yeah, how can we address something we don't know or not aware of and just assume? Yeah, actually, that's a great segue to the next, I would say, theme of this panel, is that we're here talking about just the myriad of data and research that's available, and just Howard, with all the different reports that are coming out, and OSTA, just all the pulse and the surveys you guys do with small business owners. What can we do as researchers and ecosystem practitioners to collaborate in this effort so that it's not just being siloed, right? Because that's the feeling that I think we all get and we all know. And not just what we can do to collaborate, but how do we ensure our data and research are inclusive of all business owners for both demographic and geography diversity? I mean, all of you touched on this. And so, you know, would love to kind of hear, you know, maybe your what we can do, your call to action. Always and Paul, I'll actually have you touch on this first because I know Howard has a show and tell to share with us.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to go first. You know, I think people can feel like coalition work, for instance, is exhaustive because sometimes it's a lot of time with no tangible outcomes. But I think there's a lot of meaning in having a platform to bring cross-sector entities together to discuss what they are working on, because we only have so much time to do that sort of thing on a regular basis. You know, Small Business Majority actually launched the Alliance for a Resilient Small Business Economy, which is essentially a coalition of national, state, and local organizations that are committed to serving businesses owned by people of color, women, immigrants, and others who face longstanding systemic barriers. And so basically it aims to create a stronger national community of small business serving organizations, but it's also a place where we can discuss collaboration because we are able to sort of address those gaps. And so I think part of collaboration means working in coalition with each other and identifying really tangible outcomes, but also having a space to discuss data, discuss new research, because those are the sorts of things that inform our policy work. And I know our research does the same for other organizations as well.
Well said. I think we can, especially as practitioners and technical assistance providers, we can get bogged down in just the day-to-day work, right? There's a saying in the 10,000 small businesses, you know, work on your business, not in your business. And I just think we need to adapt that to working on our program and not in our program. Paul, I saw you coming off mute.
Yeah, I love the fact that let's use the word collaboration. And we, within our ecosystem, are pushing for encouraging, facilitating more collaborative technical assistance. So the way technical assistance is often offered, it's, this is why I do good. I help people with their accounting, so come to me to come get your books cleaned up. And then if you need marketing, go across the street. If you need something, then go there. And the small businesses are sent on this sort of scavenger hunt for resources. And I think that we have to put our minds in the way of the protagonists of the small business owners and say, you know, I want to use my business to generate wealth, right? So that part of it's marketing, part of it's finance, and just like the Goldman Sachs 10,000 small businesses, bringing it all together and saying this is the pathway. But in order to do that and see how we're faring, using, if you have collaboration, then you have to, it necessitates measurable outcomes. And that means that you have to share, just like you're on the design side, you have to share the data side. So without that, then some of the work and the meaning of behind your work can get lost. So using that as a tool for the monitoring, evaluation, and emphasizing the learning piece of it, and how do we course correct and create systems that are working for small businesses and having that long-term impact.
I think one of the panelists in the last session mentioned that, you know, when you create a program to you know, to ensure that the most marginalized small business owner is taken care of, then everybody wins. It's not a pie that gets separated, but really everybody can have a piece of the pie. Howard.
Yeah, thanks, Sonia. Let me give an example of some research that we're doing that is directly relevant to practitioners on an ongoing, not quite real time, but you know, relatively up-to-date basis. With the generous support of the Ewing, Marion Kaufman Foundation and using some expensive proprietary data, we are producing the most comprehensive and detailed information about what has happened to businesses and jobs in the 100 largest metropolitan areas on a quarterly basis, at least through the middle of this year, and we'll see what happens with the funding situation after that. the only ones who can tell you what's happening in under-resourced communities to businesses and jobs as compared with the rest of the metropolitan area. We're the only ones who can tell you what's happening to businesses owned by people of different races and ethnicities. We're the only ones who can tell you what's happening to businesses of different sizes. And we can also tell you what's happening to businesses in different industries, although that's something that's more readily available. And the work that we're doing is meant to help practitioners, particularly policymakers at all levels of government and small business technical assistance providers, understand what kinds of businesses are recovering most rapidly and which ones are having the most trouble recovering, and therefore where they should direct their assistance resources. And our work will also be helpful to funders of small business technical assistance, particularly technical assistance that's meant to help promote pandemic recovery, because it helps put the local recovery situation in perspective and give a context for the local efforts that are going on. So let me give you first a very quick overview of what we've been finding. Our work right now is current through the third quarter of last year. Next month, we'll have work current through the fourth quarter of last year. So we're always a little bit lagged, but a lot less lagged than the government data are. Just a quick summary of the summary. In the top 100 metro areas as a whole, the number of businesses and the number of jobs have both been continuing to recover. Neither one is quite back to where it was before the pandemic started. The number of jobs was back to 92% of where it was before the pandemic, and the number of businesses was a little bit lower at 86%. Businesses owned by people of color have seen more business growth and more job growth overall in the last quarter, meaning the third quarter of last year, than businesses owned by white people. So that's a surprising bit of good news. A bit of not so good news, although not one that probably would surprise you, is that the smallest businesses are having a harder time recovering than larger businesses are. And so that's the big national overview. If you want to see what's going on in individual metro areas and their under-resourced communities, we have a data dashboard, which I will just give you a very quick demo of. Let me share my screen here. Let's see, screen. Here it is. Okay. So here you can see what's happened to businesses and jobs in the under-resourced communities, the low-income, high-poverty communities in both the central cities and suburbs of the Kansas City metropolitan area. You can see that there's been a recovery of over 90% of both businesses and jobs, with businesses in this case recovering a little bit more than jobs, unlike overall in the national picture. If you look at specific industries, you can see how much recovery has happened to businesses and to jobs in each industry. For example, take a look at healthcare, an industry that's recovered relatively strongly. The number of healthcare businesses is up by, or was in the third quarter of last year, up by 8.9% from what it was in the second quarter of 2020 when the pandemic started. The number of jobs in healthcare, however, is down by almost 19%. So still some room for improvement on the job front. If you look by business size, you can see that the situation in the under-resourced communities of Kansas City area is a little bit different than it is nationally. And nationally, the smallest businesses overall were having the most trouble recovering. But here you can see that the very tiniest businesses in this particular area, the ones with 1 to 4 employees actually had a slightly better time recovering than those with 5 to 9 employees. And then after that, as generally as business size increases, recovery also improves, although when you get to the 100+ category, it's actually a little bit less than for the 50 to 99 employee category. And that's true for both businesses and jobs. So things can be different. They often are different in individual communities than they are nationwide. And we also have information about business and job recovery in the most recent quarter by businesses owned by different groups of people. We see that businesses owned by Asian and Pacific Islander entrepreneurs are seem to be doing the best in terms of both business and job recovery. Black-owned businesses in this area are doing pretty well on business recovery, not as much on job recovery. So that's just a little taste for one particular areas under-resourced communities of what we're able to show using this resource that we've created. And if you want to see how to use it, you should go to our webpage, whose URL I'm showing right here. And I'm also happy to answer questions and help anybody navigate through it and get customized information that will help you in your own community, help you direct small business assistance to where it's needed the most. And I didn't put my email on this slide, but it is hwial@icic.org. So that's just an example of what we've been able to do with some very expensive data and some terrific philanthropic support to help bridge the gap between researchers and the data needs of practitioners in both small business technical assistance organizations and policymakers.
Yeah, and again, this is a generous funding from Kauffman Foundation, which is obviously part of this Entrepreneurship Week and eShip, which is fantastic, I think, and that really speaks to both, what Ariska and Paul were talking about collaborative on different aspects, not just on, funding, but technical assistance as well. And I know, Howard, what you just shared, it can truly be utilized no matter your role, whether it's in policy or you are a practitioner or you're a funder, just to see, especially, from different cities that you all might be tuning in from, what's happening in your city, and what is that story that's currently being told, the latest pulse that we are all always wanting to know, I think. And so, again, Howard shared how to access that dashboard if you'd like. You can go to icic.org, or you can also email me at smoin, MOSMOIN But any last, before I wrap up, any last call to action or anything else that's like burning in your chest to get out, either for any of my panelists out here? Thank you, Esther.
Yeah, I'd like to just put in a plug for you, even though we can and we should, as Paul advocated, be creative in the use of all kinds of data sources that currently exist. There are still data gaps that are really hard to bridge, no matter how creative we get. Especially understanding in a timely way what's happening to businesses and jobs, wages, and business revenues at the small local geography level in neighborhoods and in under-resourced communities. You have to rely on very expensive proprietary data to do that, which of course limits the ability to accomplish anything. Another area where it's really where there's really a big data gap is understanding what's going on with businesses owned by people of different races and ethnicities. The annual business survey from the Census Bureau does have information about race and ethnicity of business owners, but it's not all that detailed. And even more importantly, it's a couple of years out of date. So again, we're forced to rely on expensive proprietary data sources, which then just makes the conduct and use of the research more expensive for everybody involved, more expensive for us as a research organization, more expensive for our partners in the public and private and nonprofit sectors who are users of the research and funders of the research. So just a plug for filling those gaps. We know that philanthropic funders don't have the same capacity as, say, the federal government, but perhaps they could help with some pilot projects, or at least use their convening power to help call attention to these needs and help practitioners understand why they're important and help federal policymakers understand why practitioners need them.
I was going to say, I think one of the things that really stood out to me was when Paul said that, you have to be able to go into these, whatever it is, with the sort of foresight to collect information. It can't be sort of after the fact. And I feel like that's so true. We have a ton of work that practitioners are doing, but we don't often know, like, what are the really effective programs that do work, and what are the programs for certain communities that work better than others. And so I really like the idea of trying to think about that and sort of have the foresight to see how you can collect the outcomes before the outcomes actually happen, so you know what to expect and what to look for. And I think that'll really help address some of these data and research gaps.
I would like to just close out from my side of, we're always looking for collaborators. So happy to share data and approaches and thoughts. My information is in the chat, but my main focus, one of the main focuses is, again, democratizing this data so we can put it in the hands of the people who are on the ground, so to speak, to use it. So I think, sometimes there's this disconnect between the macro analysis that we've done that says, Black women-owned restaurants, totally make this up, are less prone to have POS systems than their counterparts, right? And it's 50%. And then you go into a neighborhood, you talk to your different neighborhood collaborators and say, yeah, I can name 5 people who need to have more technology infused in their businesses, and here they are. But how do you bring those two worlds together and pinpoint not only what the macro trends are, but how do you get this to the people in the street that can do something with it, and the trusted connectors to affect change? So I think we have to, again, make this actionable and then measure the impact. So to the extent that there's ideas and approaches to that, I'm excited to talk to you.
Thank you so much. I mean, I would hope that this is exactly what this conversation would start, how to collaborate, and especially, in making sure that all of you touched on is that whether it's collecting the data or utilizing the data, but that it pulls together all the entrepreneurs that we are trying to impact. And it's not just about how many entrepreneurs we've impacted. Paul, you mentioned that, but what does that impact look like on the ground? And it's always going to change from neighborhood to neighborhood. Guys, thank you so much. Thank you sincerely from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to be part of this panel, for all the back and forth behind the scene work that you all did, and just sharing your insights and collaborative opportunities. I think, the more we can get together, the more we can convene on a platform like this, the more we learn from each other and identify those opportunities. We can't do it in a vacuum. So for that, I want to thank Joe and Amber as well. Thank you for the opportunity to bring this topic to life. It's just really the highlight of my week. So thank you. And again, Howard, Awesta, Paul, so thankful. Just love working with you all.
Yeah,
Thanks
well,
all.
thank you. We really appreciate, the data piece is just an ever expanding piece of this. And so we're so appreciative. It's funny, last night we did a dry run through for the event that we're holding tomorrow night on the virtual reality event on entrepreneurship. And, as you guys were talking, I was just thinking about, virtual reality, the metaverse, as people set up businesses and what kind of data is going to be collected and how do we make sure that people are going to be included. In fact, we have Cordell Carter coming from the Aspen Institute to talk a little bit about virtual reality, metaverse, and inclusion. And so I think it's going to be a really, really fascinating conversation. And this data piece is so important. Sonia, I want to thank you and your leadership on this and the idea for this panel. It's super important. And I think it's something that we're going to have to look at again and how we can go ahead and do a deeper dive. It's just really fantastic. And thank you to all of the panelists for your insights and Howard for the really fantastic information with regards to the charts. It's, Amber and I relaunched National Entrepreneurship Week really to address a lot of these gaps that weren't necessarily parts of conversations and to be able to bring folks together. And speaking of bringing folks together, tomorrow we are bringing over 30 federal government agencies together, pretty unprecedented, to share information, resources, and an array of statistics of programs that's going to be ranging from the SBIR program, which is a small business investment program, all the way to entrepreneurship education, and also resources, both financial and non-financial resources. And so we've got a fully packed day. And then in the evening, the SBA Chief Innovation Officer is going to be joining me, as well as the president of the VR AR XR Association and Cordell from the Aspen Institute. And we're going to go on a little bit of a journey. You can actually access that via your computer if you don't have a VR headset, but it's definitely going to be much more immersive. And then on Thursday, Everyday Entrepreneurs, we're showcasing entrepreneurs that run the gamut. And so we'd encourage you to really identify times and entrepreneurs that are going to be there for you to hear. And then Friday, we're going to touch on Funding Friday again. As I mentioned this at the top of the hour, focusing on the first panel is going to include the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Treasury Department, and the SBA. After that, we'll have a panel on bootstrapping. And then to close us all out, we'll start with Jessica from 10,000 Small Businesses, Goldman Sachs, and then hear from a number of folks. Because one of the biggest questions is going out and getting outside investors and outside money, and how people can do that. So there is still a lot more to come. And I just want to reiterate my thanks. This was a fantastic conversation. I'm going to hand it back over to Amber, who is more eloquent than I am. So Amber, take us home.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that attended today's sessions and sat through 3 back to back. I know it's a testament to the quality of the panelists today that we have had such good engagement across those panels, and definitely would encourage you all to register for tomorrow's program as a follow-up for some federal resources to today's programming. So I did drop the National eShip Week website in the chat, but there will also be a newsletter. I encourage you to subscribe. We're sending out a daily newsletter push about the next day's programming. So keep an eye out for that. And we will see you tomorrow bright and early at 9 a.m. Eastern. Joe, do you have something?
Yeah, just one final note. I want to go ahead and offer just a big thank you to Sonia for helping us identify some really, really good folks on a number of different panels. We really appreciate. As well as Bill Woodrum, who was, both of you guys have been instrumental working with us throughout the last several months to put together solid programs. And so while I have you here, I just wanted to go ahead and extend our heartfelt thanks for all of your input and participation. We really appreciate it. So thank you very much for that as well.
Thank you, guys. Thank you all again. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.